Good morning, Bitcoin. It's still Friday, August 25th, and we've seen something interesting happening on the Bitcoin charts. It might be breaking out. Bitcoin on Bitstamp hit a 4445.1 before reclining to a 4410. We are watching this closely here on the World Crypto Network. We've got your chat here on the side, and we're joined by Jimmy Song and Tone Vase. How's it going, Jimmy?
It's going great. We just did today in Bitcoin, so this is kind of a bonus for all of you that are watching the price. This a time for everybody that wants to celebrate. Hopefully, we hit this all-time high. I think Tone's more the technical analysis expert on the price movement, but it does look like a breakout to me, and hopefully we can see that. We want to celebrate with you all, and we want to have this live stream kind of like we did a couple of days ago, where we kind of watch the markets and we watch like Segwit and stuff like that. So yeah, glad to be here, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, we're at 44.14, and let's go to Tone for a check of the markets, which are active this morning.
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, we were, well, the moment we got off today in Bitcoin this morning, the price was just popping. Was watching it on this hourly chart. I don't even know. Oh man, I have the high turned off here. Hold on, let me put that back up. Background OHCL. So we just were watching it pop all the way to 44.60 on Bitfinex, and on Bitstamp, I believe it went even didn't go higher. Now 44.45, and we were literally like $35 away from the all-time high, and smidge away from 5,000, basically, not 5,000, but 4,500 anyway. And we're like, oh man, let's be live for this. Let's be live for this all-time high. And we're pulling back a little bit, but I still think that we will go back up shortly. Let's see what happens. I really don't want to go to a smaller time frame, but if I have to, I will.
Wow.
We've also got a couple of videos we're going to try to play. I was just thinking we might randomly play some excerpts from the Richard Hart, Roger Ver debate. I might try to get that up in a minute. But first, let's see. We had this link from Bitcoin Art Gallery. Let me get the screen share going. And he said, there are more Google searches for Bitcoin than Donald Trump, Clinton, Bernie Sanders, or North Korea. So that was a pretty amazing chart to see that Bitcoin is just really doing well in the Google searches right now. Although it's tough to say. It looks like North Korea had a bit of a spike there, and then Bitcoin took back over. But it is exciting to see that Bitcoin popularity is growing around the world, and we can monitor this with Google Trends. It's a really cool program they put out. Tone, what have you got there?
If you are going to go to the Richard Hart video, I was in the middle of it. I'm actually going to double check right now because I don't believe I got to that part. This way I can tell you guys exactly where I was in that video. Oh man, assuming I can find it now at this point. But anyway, but someone tweeted this at me earlier today, basically, and they put a timestamp into the video. I think I was just short of that. I think that video is about an hour long, right? What's the time in that video? Total time?
It's about an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay, so I think I was about 25 minutes in, because I don't remember this part, but someone tweeted the following message at me saying that Roger apparently claimed on the video that he didn't sell any of his Bitcoin for Bcash, but the person pointed out to Roger's a Reddit account where he claims that he did sell 16 days ago, that he did sell Bitcoin for Bcash. So maybe we can, if we are going to play parts of that video, I would like to fact check this and what exactly Roger said and compare it to these posts from Memory Dealers, which is Roger Ver's Reddit account, saying the opposite of what apparently was said during the video.
Do you think we could get Roger Ver on the show right now? That would be.
I mean, it's midnight in Japan. I mean, I don't want to text him. Maybe Thomas does. But
I'm pretty sure he would come on, but it just depends on the time zone. He's likely asleep.
I doubt. Here's why he's not going to come on, because this isn't a one-on-one debate, and Roger isn't happy when he's up against multiple parties. He always wants it to be even. So he would only come on if it's like, a true moderator plus one person on the opposite side. The moment he feels there could be multiple people debating him, he wouldn't come on.
Well, it wouldn't be so much a debate. We could just ask him how it went. It would be more of a casual interview.
You know what? With me being on this call, I would have to probably come off because I would not be able to guarantee that statement you just made.
Well, it would start out nice.
All right. So are you going to play an excerpt, Thomas?
I can't say that word either. It looks like we've got 543 live viewers. If everyone could give us a thumbs up and a share, that would help more people find the show. If you have someone you think we should have as a guest, put their name in the chat. Maybe you're in the chat and you think you should be a guest. But we've got a couple of videos to play. Jimmy, what order? What should we start with? A little bit of the Roger Ver debate or what?
Yeah, let's do the Roger Ver debate. We can save my stuff for later.
All right, we've got a variety of videos. We're watching the prices.
I will say, hey Thomas, I will say that I did listen to the part where Roger was explaining the reasons for empty blocks being mined, and I would love to explore that a little bit. And that part definitely came before the 30-minute mark. Is that video transcribed with timestamps of topics? That would have been great.
I don't think someone has gone through and done that. That usually takes like a couple hours at least.
I know on the World Crypto Network, we have our man Jaggy, who's been taking care of that for us. It's been great to have him on board. I think it might be fun if we just kind of let the video go, and then maybe if Tone or Jimmy have something they want to add to the video, we can pause it.
Oh yeah, we could totally do the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing.
Yeah, we'll just kind of let it go, and then if the price moves, Tone, let us know. We'll cut over to the price. Again, we're going to screw up Richard's beautiful feed here by rebroadcasting it, and the audio is not going to be great either. It's kind of off my speakers here in the room.
I would start at like maybe the 5 or 10 minute mark. There really wasn't much in the very beginning.
Well, let's just see how it starts. We can't just say no. So here we go. Just a sec.
We would have, by the way, we would have Richard Hart on the show, but he stayed up all night doing this debate and everything. So I believe that he's sleeping at the moment.
All right, and we're going to try to play this.
This is live. I guess we're live. Hello, chat. Hello, Roger Ver, legendary Bitcoin investor. First guy to do a lot of things. Has a lot of Bitcoin, owns Bitcoin.com, or has a ton of influence at it. Richard Hart here, thought leader, lol, just a crypto longevity self-help guy. Want Bitcoin to do really well. I set up a structure for this here debate. We're going to be first talking about things we agree on, which is a lot. Then I'll try and steelman his argument, present the best version of it I'm capable of. And then if he's satisfied with it, then we can go on to, the disagreement stuff. So Roger, you're a libertarian. You like voluntarism?
Yep, I prefer the word voluntarist to libertarian, since lots of libertarians in the U.S. aren't actually libertarians anymore. But I'm a voluntarist in the sense of Murray Rothbard and those sorts.
All right. So I think we agree on fungibility, the right of one person to transact in commerce with another person without a bunch of third parties getting in the way, injecting their nose where it doesn't belong. Creating misincentives, mall incentives, overregulation. I think we're both against those things.
Yeah, I think 90% of what we talk about, I think all of our end goals are probably almost identical, and we just see different means to achieve those goals, and we probably just disagree on the means to achieve those ends. That's where I'm guessing this is going to head today.
All right. So what else? We believe in living in nice places. And I guess promoting our beliefs. We both have strong beliefs. and we go about promoting them in public. So I guess we're kind of advocates for the things we believe in. And I used to do martial arts, but nowhere near as cool as what you've done, Urs, for as long. So I guess that's the extent of our easy to find agreements. So I'd like to try and steelman what I believe are your arguments that I've heard recently, above and beyond those ones that we just went over. Would that be all right with you? Can I present what I think your arguments are? Okay.
Go for it. And if it's okay, I'll jump in if I hear a part where I disagree with.
All right. So Roger Ver was one of the first investors in the Bitcoin space, one of the first evangelists. He's gotten a lot of people into this ecosystem. He's offered a lot of liquidity. I believe he still holds a lot of equity in companies in the Bitcoin space. And from what I hear, he owns a lot of Bitcoins themselves, which means that he truly cares. He has skin in the game. And, you know, he's been out there giving talks and dedicating his life to this for a very long time. And he interacts and debates with people that they aren't out there promoting to the public as much as he is. They don't use Bitcoin to transact as often as he does. They don't remember what it was like when fees were so low you would never, ever even think about them. And, you know, this system used to be a lot more decentralized. Everyone ran a node because you could mine on your CPU. So you would just run the node at the same time that you were mining on your CPU. You know, there was 30,000+ nodes. Now I think there's under 1,000, whatever it is. It's some not large enough number to support the 50, 60+ billion dollar market cap of this system. So what he's seen over the years,
sure it's more than 5,000 nodes that accept incoming connections, and probably tens of thousands that don't accept incoming connections.
Yeah, and then we'd have to subtract all the ones that are controlled by the same central party through AWS, which we don't know how to really discount all of those that are like centrally controlled by the same guy. It'd be like, instead of having multiple newspapers, you just have more copies of the same newspaper. It's important to have geographically redundant and game theory redundant differences in your nodes, I think. So
I just looked it up. There's 9,240 nodes that accept incoming connections. And then there's probably somewhere in the order of 10 times that don't.
I wonder how many millions of dollars of equity that is per node. What's divided by 9,000? Makes you wonder. So, you know, I thought that, well, I won't go into why I think more people should run nodes, but if you own Bitcoin, shouldn't you run a node? Shouldn't you want the ecosystem to work? Shouldn't you want people to be able to download the chain faster, you know, from a good, honest connection that you operate? So what Roger's seen over the years is, you know, the old guys that used to develop the software, they stopped. Satoshi stopped. Matti Malmi stopped. Gavin Anderson stopped. Mike Hearn stopped. And they kind of stopped before they stopped. Like Mike Hearn really didn't even work on the main Bitcoin. He worked on his own kind of J implementation of it. It was different. And if you look at the commits, even Gavin, he worked a lot more on theory than he did on like figuring out writing code at some point. So now there's a whole bunch of new guys in charge. And I think from Roger's perspective, he's concerned that they don't understand the economics. They've had disagreements with Mike Hearn and Gavin Anderson. Unresolvable disagreements to where there was a split. Gavin went and did a lot of testing and said he tested up to 20 megabyte blocks and it worked fine. So if you're not a technician and you're not doing the research yourself, you got to decide who you're going to trust. Are you going to take the word of the guy who's been there from the beginning and spoken and worked with Satoshi, or are you going to trust these new guys? New guys that apparently don't hold enough Bitcoin, don't incentivize people enough, have a misunderstanding of economics, want to see full blocks, tried to pump a fee market, say the fees are good, which has hurt the user experience, slowed everything down, and you know, and they appear in effect to kind of look like they're colluding with Themios and Bitcoin Talk and Bitcoin Reddit, with not letting Roger get his position out there.
So if I can jump in on one part there. So I guess in regards to the censorship, I'm not upset that they're not letting me get my position out there because I have a loud voice, I have a loud platform. You know, I have about 100,000 followers on Twitter. I can get my opinion out. The people that I'm really upset with are the people that aren't me, and they're just somebody on the internet who have an opinion, and their posts will literally be deleted from our Bitcoin or Bitcoin Talk if they post something that's not towing the party line. So I have a loud voice. I can get my opinion out there, but everybody else isn't able to with the you know, moderation policies that are going on at the moment. So, but overall, you've done a great job.
Are you complaining about censorship?
All right. So high fees.
Okay. So the first issue would be censorship on the internet, I suppose.
Yeah, can we?
I've muted the thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy. Go ahead. I want to comment on this also.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about our Bitcoin, but I don't go on our Bitcoin. I think a lot of people don't go on our Bitcoin, and you know, I don't know, like on our BTC, if you post the same link, oftentimes you get downvoted, and it's sort of like a soft censorship anyway. And I don't know really that many people that go on Bitcoin Talk, other than to just like go sell like mining equipment or to pump an altcoin or to like sell a Cassatius coin or something. Like I'm not really sure what he's talking about there.
Right. No, I'm with you there as well. Like I've never had a Reddit account and I've never had a Bitcoin Talk account. And saying that those accounts are really, really important. I've had this argument with him as well. But a lot of the core devs do post on Reddit to try and explain stuff. And his big argument is he just doesn't like Timos's moderation policy, and his policy has not changed in 6 years. As long as Timos has been the lead moderator, his policy has been, we're only going to talk about Bitcoins. We're not going to talk about altcoins. And the moment there is something that is perceived as a altcoin to Bitcoin, it automatically gets removed. So Litecoin posts and like Dash posts and Monero posts, they're getting removed. And the problem happens is, where do you draw the line between a Bitcoin fork and an altcoin? So once the Bitcoin Classic posts and the Bitcoin XT posts began being censored because they were treated as altcoins by Timos and other moderators, that's when this whole censorship debate really started.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure that it was that relevant, to be honest, because I don't know. It's been a long time since our Bitcoin was that influential. I know people like still post to it and stuff, but
no, I agree.
You know,
let's also examine the moderation policy. It's not that unreasonable to ban altcoins. Part of the problem with altcoin posts is that everyone finds their favorite altcoin, gets really excited about it, and comes back to post. Now, whether they're pumpers or whether they're legitimately excited, if you post every day, buy Dash, et cetera, you could see why Thamos would block these people, right?
Right. And look, maybe Timos went a little bit overboard on blocking a little too much when it came to Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin XT and what was the other one?
Bitcoin Unlimited.
Bitcoin Unlimited, right? I think that's the one that really hit a nerve with Roger, because I think he was more in support of that one than the previous two, even though he's been in support of all of them. I think that one really hit a nerve. But look, I will agree, it does get murky. I mean, maybe they censored a little too much, or I shouldn't even say censored. You know, maybe they moderated a little too much on those fronts. And on the flip side, posts about segregated witness on Litecoin were allowed to stay. So those people had an additional argument saying, well, how come people are now talking about Litecoin? And the reasoning was, well, that's because they're adopting Bitcoin's technology, because there were people are blocking this technology on Segwit. So I can certainly see, you know, the situation, you know, being a little bit murky there on what is and isn't an altcoin and what should or shouldn't be posted on a Bitcoin forum. My biggest problem with the situation is not the fact that, yeah, sure, you can have your argument with Timos. I don't understand how the core developers ended up being blamed for this. Basically, they were accused of sponsoring this as censorship, and then they were called out that because they didn't, you know, go after Timos and ridicule him, that they were somehow responsible for it. And I thought that was a very low blow, and not what they should have done in order to prove their point that Timos is maybe doing something wrong.
And let's also be clear on our terms and definitions here. I would say that moderation is when you have a controlled forum and you moderate it to have a result, such as a good discussion. We moderate the World Crypto Network forum. We remove spam accounts. We remove people that are incredibly rude, etc., with the goal of creating a good discussion. Now, censorship, on the other hand, is usually referred to the government. It's the government that censors you, and it's also absolute. With censorship, the problem is that you can't get your message out at all. Now, you know, we might stop your comments on World Crypto Network. You could always go on Twitter and make fun of us there. You could go make your own blog. No one is really stopping you. It's a huge internet. Maybe it's harder to get your message in front of people, but that's a something about developing your message. So these people are being moderated off of our Bitcoin, but they can start their own subreddit. There's a Litecoin subreddit. There's a Dash subreddit. They can still express their opinions. So it's difficult for me to say that they're being censored, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't like that a lot of posts were just sort of like removed. And I do think I agree with Tone that maybe Thamos went a little bit overboard on that. And for that reason, I just kind of stopped paying attention to our Bitcoin and went over to Twitter. And I think a lot of other people did too. Like, if you don't like it, there are other places you can go. And, you know, and I think it's great that Roger created his own subreddit, that he created his own website. Great. Now, you know, people can go over there and do whatever it is that they want. I think that's a very good free market solution. And I don't know if sort of complaining that other people aren't playing by the rules that you like is necessarily a great argument, because if you have the ability to go and make things happen. And that's something that I wrote in my post yesterday about why I was wrong about Segwit and big blocks. It's like individuals have tremendous power in this community. And if you don't like something, you can go and make stuff happen. And I applaud Roger for that. You know, he created these other communities and did whatever he wanted. He, you know, fixed whatever he didn't like. And I think that's the way to do it. You know, if you have the better argument, if you have the better, you know, policy, people will naturally gravitate to that. I mean, I think you know, his forums and whatever aren't as popular right now, perhaps due to, you know, the positions that the people there take or however they vote it down. But at least it's a free market. I like that. I like market solutions, and I think that's the way it should be.
And there are many forums on the internet that you can't control, like 4chan or Reddit. And then there are forums that you are controlled. There's mailing lists. There's places like Twitter. You can ban and block people. I still think there's a lot of chance for everyone to get their voice out. I don't know that anyone except for Roger, who says, as he says, you know, he has 100,000 Twitter followers. He has his own platform. He's doing fine. I'm not sure who else is complaining. I'm not sure who else is.
Well, let's get back to the debate between them. The price is holding steady at 44.25. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and every time we break to do some commentary, we'll get back there with a picture of the price.
All right, and we're going back to the debate.
Disagreements with the original devs regarding the feasibility of things that may bring fees down, economic theory complaints regarding the desire for full blocks, censorship. Let me think. I think I got it. I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it pretty well. Maybe I can clarify a little bit where my biggest fear comes in. And my biggest fear at this point, as someone that's a holder of Bitcoin and, you know, the CEO of Bitcoin.com and someone who's poured my heart and soul into this for about 7 years now, is that we had the formula that brought Bitcoin from 0 to 1, from absolutely nothing to this amazing ecosystem that it is today. And that formula within the last year has intentionally been changed. And that formula was letting the blocks get as big as they need to be and keeping the fees low, and the transactions, you know, all of them would be confirmed in the very next block. And that brought Bitcoin from nothing to, you know, 10+ million users. And now we have a group of people that are actively trying to change that code for success that we know for sure works, because we have, you know, the entire history of Bitcoin to prove that it works. And maybe their new plan of full blocks and high fees and the fee market and all that, maybe it will work. And in their theories, they think it will work, but we don't have any real world data to back that up. Whereas with the previous roadmap, we have years and years and years of empirical evidence showing that it does work, and it worked amazingly well. And so I'm terrified changing away from something that we know works and works incredibly well in favor of something that might work, but then again, it might not. And there's, you know, billions and billions of dollars on the line. So that's what really scares me, is the veering away from something that we have lots and lots of empirical evidence for that works and works incredibly well, to something that might work or might not work. And in theory, I think it's less likely to work, to be honest. But even if I give them the benefit of the doubt that the theory works, we don't have the empirical evidence to back that up at all. And I would much rather go with a system that has the empirical evidence and, you know, I don't know, 9-year-long track record now of success, than with something that doesn't have. If anything, it has a negative track record at this point. Bitcoin's been losing a huge amount of market share since the blocks became full and the fees became high and the transactions became long. So that's where my biggest fear is.
Because that is the first thing on my list, because I got a little list here.
Perfect.
So I believe that the actual use cases for Bitcoin currently are insanely small. Newegg used to accept it, they stopped. Wikipedia used to accept it, they stopped. There's an airline that used to accept it, they stopped. More large companies have stopped accepting Bitcoin than have started. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, even people that—
the timeline was for the ones that stopped?
I think they might have tried it out for a year and then gave up on it, more or less.
I think most of them stopped around the time the network started to become congested and people started having a bad user experience because you didn't know when their transactions were going to be confirmed.
Well, I know for a fact Wikipedia stopped because they A/B tested it and got less donations because of confusion. That's just reasonable, and they restrict a lot of the other payment methods they could accept. As one of the largest websites on the internet, for that reason. So Bitcoin has a lot of problems. It has bad user interface. It has no retail marketing. It has
So I would disagree on the no retail marketing front. So in 2012, I set up bitcoinstore.com, which was the first website in the world to start offering big items of consumer electronics items for sale for Bitcoin. We had around 500,000 items for sale, most of which that were about the same price or even less than Amazon.com. And in our first year, we sold more than $4 million worth of merchandise. And that was back in 2012. And the ecosystem is much, much, much bigger than that now. So I think there is a lot of commerce that goes on with Bitcoin, and it might not just be right there in front of everybody's face, especially if they're not using it. But I would disagree with the point that there's not much commerce going on.
Well, my point wasn't that there wasn't commerce, it's that there wasn't marketing. So we have a tragedy of the commons problem. You may have advertised through your retail website, but you weren't promoting general Bitcoin ads. These pump and dump ICOs that have marketing.
Again, so I think for national radio ads on more than 150 radio stations across the United States for like 6 years straight, promoting Bitcoin in general, and almost all of those ads are actually promoting Bitcoin.org. And so there was a huge amount of that, and I wasn't the only one doing things like that. There was a lot of action like that.
Well, I mean, either would you like to see there more? Would you like there to be more marketing?
I'd like there to be more marketing for a product that's actually useful for people. And at the moment, I'm worried about the utility of Bitcoin.
Okay.
I think is
well, we can skip past Bitcoin's problems if you want, and shift to the fork stuff if you want.
Let's turn into a 6-hour long podcast. But
I'll give you a list of the things I have here, and then you pick which ones you want to play with.
Okay.
So here's what we've got. I think that most people don't use Bitcoin for the currency case as opposed to the store value case because you'd break your neck to try and find someone that would accept it. It's very, very hard to spend, and it's very, very hard to buy. So it's much better just to sit on it and watch it shoot to the moon and get rich sitting than it is to effectively pay 8 times more for anything you ever used because now you don't have those coins, you spent them. Like anytime you use Bitcoin and you don't replace them, you feel really bad when you realize you spent 8 times what you needed to because you didn't replace them.
So that's a good argument to replace the Bitcoin you're spending every time you spend them.
It is, but people are lazy, and sometimes they're afraid to buy in at 4 and 8x higher numbers because people, think there'll be a reversion to the mean. So yes, people spend your Bitcoin, ask people to accept them, replace them if you do spend them. So here's my list. I think the reason Bitcoin price dropped it didn't drop on its own. It dropped in relation to other things that appeal to other people. Bitcoin has always appealed to libertarians and free thinkers. And another meme came out with the Kumbaya world computer social justice warrior thing. And they're different vertical markets. And Bitcoin was known to these people and wasn't appealing to them, but world computer was. And now that world computer meme that the social justice warrior types love is promoting pump and dump ICO crap and is the network which all the pump and dump garbage is being released on. The reason that this space is considered frothy and overvaluated is because of those pump and dump ICOs that are running on an ecosystem which is not Bitcoin. And having lower fees in Bitcoin would not have affected that market cap ratio whatsoever. So the reason that we have...
All right, let's go to another update here. We're talking about lower fees. All right, so first I want to recap what they've been saying. They're saying that Bitcoin is losing market share because of congestion is Roger's argument. I think Richard's argument would be because of the new features of altcoins such as Ethereum and Dash. Ethereum featuring many blockchains, the ability to create ICOs, and Dash featuring privacy and that kind of features. Tone, what do you think so far? Still muted.
We're kind of right in the middle of their next talk about Ethereum. So I really want to comment on that as well, but maybe I'll just comment on the uses of Bitcoin in stores. Richard is actually absolutely right. I mean, I regret almost every single purchase of Bitcoin I ever made. Like almost all of them. Anything outside of, hey, Thomas, you mind paying, $20 for my dinner and I'll just reimburse you in Bitcoin. I mean, that's fine, right? And it's really cool that I walk around with a Bitcoin watch, those that have met me in person, and the Bitcoin watch is like the first out of 200 as it's inscribed. But that watch cost me 3 Bitcoins. It's not a big deal when a Bitcoin was like $300 at the time, even less. I think it was like 275. I literally bought it at the all-time low. But now I'm like, God damn, the watch is really cool and it's an awesome, social symbol, people are like, oh shit, because these watches aren't even for sale anymore. But in hindsight, Bitcoin is about to be $5,000, and that watch ain't worth no $5,000. Which could have been the Bitcoins that had I held on to them.
That's $15,000.
Sorry, 15,000. You're right. Exactly. Right. So Richard is absolutely right. And while some people really don't mind immediately replenishing their Bitcoin with a bank account, some people like me have been critical of Coinbase since the day they're launched. It is incredibly difficult for me to buy Bitcoin, especially, well, for two reasons. One, I don't have a job that pays me in fiat. And two, I have to go out into the street and pay like a 10% premium sometimes to meet people at coffee shops, which isn't as safe as it used to be about 3 years ago when Bitcoin was 3 or 4 years ago when Bitcoin was new. So Richard is absolutely right. Another reason why a lot of stores aren't accepting Bitcoin is because, like, look, I'm a store owner. Right, I have a physical business in New Jersey. I don't really like to talk about it often because I don't need the aggravation. But my physical location, I've been accepting Bitcoin for over 3 years. No one has ever paid with Bitcoin. At this point, I wish I can remove that business from anywhere that says we accept Bitcoin, because I am not going to keep retrading employees that are making like minimum wage that are coming through there to know how to accept Bitcoin in case one guy once a year is going to show up, okay? It is somewhat a ridiculous, it just doesn't work. I'm sorry, guys. This is the reason why you show up at some store that's on the Bitcoin map, we accept Bitcoin, there's like 8 employees there, and no one has any clue what the hell you're talking about, because none of those employees were working there 6 months earlier when Bitcoin was, maybe explained to them. And it's not those same employees. And it's really not worth the effort of a manager to constantly educate their employees if no one is coming in to spend it.
I also think we need to think long term about this. We're going to replace gold, then we're going to replace the dollar. So think about the functions of gold. Gold is used for speculation. People hold it. They sell it at special stores on special occasions. That's Bitcoin. If you look at the dollar, it's a currency. Everyone uses it. It's all over the place. That's not Bitcoin. I think we need to go step by step here, and we're just not there yet. Jimmy?
Yeah, and this is sort of the fundamental disagreement, I think, between the two camps is what kind of coin is it? Is it a store of value coin or a medium of exchange coin? And I do have to like give Roger credit, because whenever I used to introduce Bitcoin to people, it was always like really sexy to show them, hey, I'm going to give you $5 right now in Bitcoin. And, back then it was like, a significant, like it's worth a lot more today. But I would send somebody $5 in Bitcoin. They would get it, and it would blow their minds, right? Because that was sort of the thing that you could just sort of point to and say, this is why Bitcoin is valuable. But I think that argument has changed. And I think Bitcoin has evolved a little bit since I think what Roger's talking about, he's sort of giving the arguments from like maybe 2012, 2013. It's evolved, and it's much more now a medium of value, sorry, not a medium of exchange, but a store of value. And it's a lot harder to make that sexy, right? Like you can't just sort of like send it over on with a QR code and like blow their minds. I remember like giving some Bitcoins to a friend, and he was like texting me. I was like, just text me your address. I'll pay you right now. And that blew his mind, right? Like he was like, I get Bitcoin now. And I get that. I get that. And that's still like a very cool way to introduce Bitcoin to somebody as sort of like a way to transfer value. I get that. But I think economically, I think just sort of in a sound money economic perspective, I think even Roger would agree that store of value is a significant part of the value of Bitcoin. And that's something that we keep sort of losing track of sometimes when we do a lot of these cool medium of exchange things.
And their comments are going back and forth in the chat. I'm trying to keep up. There's some mockery going on there. They're saying, a peer-to-peer electronic gold system. Well, it's true. That's not what Satoshi titled his paper. We're aware of that. But again, we're thinking long-term here. And another guy says, it will get there, but first it has to be a dependable and trusted store of value. That's it right there. I think we have to establish store of value, then establish currency. And a lot of the things that Roger and Richard are saying are very true, that there's no marketing company for Bitcoin. We're not spending millions of dollars on television advertisements. That's why no one knows about it. That's why no one uses it. That's why Tone's retail example is always true. You can put out your sign. You can say you accept it. No one's going to come. Like me and like 5 other guys, and we only shop like 3 times a year, and we don't live in your town. It's going to be very difficult to get the kind of retail Bitcoin adoption that Roger's talking about low. Even if there's more blocks, even if all of these things are true, we still don't have the advertising. We still don't have the users. It's a chicken and egg problem.
I don't think it's even a marketing problem. I think like credit cards are frankly a lot better medium of exchange than Bitcoin is. I mean, other than like international remittances or something like that. To me, using a credit card, you have, you know, consumer protection, you get points on your card, you get all sorts of benefits about like, you know, some credit cards will replace whatever it is you buy if the merchant doesn't make good on a return and things like that. So, I mean, there's so many benefits to a credit card versus Bitcoin. And, you know, other than maybe international remittances and being able to like pay for your friend's beer when they're in Europe or something like that, I don't think medium of exchange is that great.
Hey guys, I'll even go a step further. Like at my business, because I'm not there all that often, and I would love to even ban cash payments at my business and go only credit card. A lot of people are always like demonizing credit cards for that 3% payment, but what you don't realize is if you have, unless you're selling like bubble gum, unless you're literally selling things that are incredibly cheap, and if your transactions at your business are over like $25 at a pop, you want credit card transactions. You don't want cash transactions. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm not at that business. And I don't know who's skimming. Even with Bitcoin, if you're not at that business and you allow your business to pay in Bitcoin, you don't know which employees are changing that QR code to their own QR code. And you're not getting that money. And you're not going to spend your entire night when you got home going through security cameras and counting every single transaction. Like, it's not as easy as it sounds for your business to accept Bitcoin unless you are the business owner always on the premises. This is one of the problems. And this is where credit cards have a huge advantage. No one ever talks about. No one can skim me when I'm not there if it's a credit card payment, because it goes directly to my bank.
I'd also definitely like to second what Jimmy said about the credit card protection. The ability for consumers to cancel their purchases is an incredible ability that credit cards have that Bitcoin doesn't have. It's all it is for retail use. But let's get back to the debate. The price of Bitcoin is $44.21. Looks like it's gone a little flat since we started the show. So much for that. But yes, let's go back to the debate.
Yeah.
So it's worth pointing out that Vitalik, the creator of Ethereum, wanted to build it on top of Bitcoin and would have built it on top of Bitcoin if not for the current core dev team telling him, you know, get the heck out of here. You're not going to build it. We're not going to increase the block size. We're not going to make room for this sort of thing to be built on top of Bitcoin. And if that had been allowed to be built on top of Bitcoin, all of that economic activity that we see happening on Ethereum would have been happening on Bitcoin instead. And that's a direct result of Bitcoin not being allowed to scale to keep up with consumer demand.
Now, this is the first part of the argument where we're going to have to get actually technical. You guys are going to have to be a little bit technical for this part. Roger just stated that it was an economic loss for Bitcoin that Ethereum didn't launch on it and tie its liquidity into it. And he is probably correct on that point. However, there's a technical point which makes his liquidity point not useful. And that is the Ethereum network is down often because they use a blockchain and the blockchain fills up just like ours. And it fills up faster because they have larger blocks. And so there's literally a competition to shove your transaction into the new ICO as a miner before you let actual normal retail people in so that you can get the coins before they run out. So there's already front running going on in Ethereum mining. There's already full blocks going on in Ethereum mining. And there's already millions upon millions of dollars being lost to gigantic attack surface in Ethereum. And I am glad that the poison and problems and bad design decisions that Vitalik and his crew made, which are unrepairable, I might add, multiple consensus implementations from different software languages from different teams are very much more likely to fall out of consensus than a single software implementation. It's very hard to write one thing that doesn't have bugs. It's exponentially harder to write 2 and more things that don't have bugs.
So if I can jump in a little bit there, that's right. So
yeah,
there were, I guess, 2 points there. So you were complaining about the miners in Ethereum colluding to get their transactions in ahead of other people so that they can do whatever. That exact same thing is happening on Bitcoin right now because the blocks are full. Mining pools and wallets like BTC China actively say, okay, people that are transacting with our wallet, we'll include your transactions first in our blocks that we mine with our pool. So that exact same thing is happening on the Bitcoin network right now, where people are front running other people's Bitcoin transactions. You can now pay with credit cards to have your transactions included with a block, because it would be too expensive to pay with the fees with Bitcoin if the initial fee wasn't high enough. In regards to the multiple yeah, it definitely sucks. In regards to the multiple implementations on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, as compared to one monolithic implementation on Bitcoin, maybe not. But if you have one bug with the monolithic implementation of Bitcoin, then the entire network comes crashing down. If you have one bug with one of 4 implementations on Ethereum, then a fourth of the network comes crashing down or forks off.
But that's worse. That's worse. Having
is a fourth of it forking off or compression down worse than 100% of it?
Yeah, it's like writing a book and then you make an edit and then you don't remember what you edited and you have to search through the whole book to see what got screwed up. But if when you write to the, like, if you can't write to the book anymore and you have to wait and there's only one copy of the book, like it's basically versioning, right? Like the reason that you don't write software with just Word documents is because you have to keep track of changes. And that's all a blockchain is. It's something that keeps track of changes. So if you had a fork, like what you've described, technically a consensus failure is a fork. This thing doesn't say the same as that thing. And now an arbiter, a trusted third party, a powerful God has to decide which one is right, which one is wrong. So
I agreed up until everything at the point where you said a powerful arbitrator or God has to decide. I think the network and the users get to decide. And we saw that with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. There was a fork and one set of users went one way and another set went another. And there wasn't some, God from on high that forced everybody to go in one direction. It was just
these forks happen all the time. They're called orphans. An orphan is the network deciding that what you thought was going to happen isn't going to happen. And it just goes away. It's a dead end. So when you mine a block and you have the longest block and everyone agrees that's the longest block, but someone else had a good proof of work at the same time, but they got there a little bit later, they're accurate, useful transactions that they decided on and fees they accepted, it goes and dies. So every single day in the Bitcoin network, every orphaned block is a version of the blockchain that never got to be agreed upon because it was decided on by the god of timing and the network consensus rules.
All right, we're going to do another quick pause there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Wait.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, that's better. Okay, so I do want to point out one thing. I think Roger claimed that Vitalik created Ethereum because he couldn't build it on Bitcoin. I was part of the Color Coins team that he decided to sort of leave, and when he decided to leave and create Ethereum, what had happened was that summer, a coin called Mastercoin came on, and they were basically the original ICO. Vitalik saw what was happening on Mastercoin, and he saw what was happening on Color Coins and sort of what we were doing, and he decided that the same funding model would work well to sort of inject liquidity into Ethereum. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say that it was due to sort of like a lack of core devs responding to his demands that he created this coin. He saw the future of ICOs, and credit to him, like he's made a ton of money doing that. But he saw the future of ICOs, and he wanted to do one himself for Ethereum. And he saw that eventually that this market would come out where a lot of people would want to do ICOs as a way to raise money. And that's sort of the direction he went. It wasn't anything in particular with Bitcoin. He wanted to raise a ton of money, and he saw that ICOs were a great way to do it, and that's kind of what he did. I don't think it would be accurate to say that the core developers prevented him.
Well, I would, I mean, you're probably right, Jimmy, but I will say that Vitalik always had this view, and I actually, maybe I can share a screen. I recently, like just the other day, like yesterday or something, I tweeted out, it was actually one of my more popular tweets, and I'm hearing that Vitalik is trying to backpedal from his statement. And this is not one of the only, this is just one of the few dumb statements Vitalik has said over the years. And here's a tweet from Vitalik that says, "Censorship is great if you can guarantee that the good guys are in charge." Okay. And I had this debate over privacy and censorship with Vitalik about 3 years ago. And I, basically considered Vitalik to be like a child and not understanding what decentralization is, not understanding what privacy is. The argument that I had with Vitalik was like in a group chat. Basically, he felt that, well, you're supposed to, let's build technology where everything is out in the open, and then the bad actors will have no choice but to like be seen. And I tried to explain to Vitalik, no, that's not how reality works. In reality, the bad actors will be in charge, and then they will see everything you do. And he thought that wasn't going to be possible. And so his views on privacy and security are completely ass backwards. And the no core developer, even at the time, was giving him any respect for his, ideology. On top of that, Vitalik never really liked proof of work. He always wanted to do proof of stake. And again, that's technological ideology at this point. That still pretty much gets ridiculed by the core developers, and rightly so. So Vitalik would never even get a chance to build anything he wanted on Bitcoin because I don't think too many people really respect his ability. He's being he's godlike, and people think he's a genius, but I don't think that he is, and a lot of core developers don't really think that he is. But I just also want to be a little critical of Richard here before I forget, because hey, I am trying to be provide mystery science theater, like you said, and I clearly recall Richard on videos maybe a month ago or so, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, saying that Bitcoin needs this ICO infusion onto Bitcoin because it doesn't really have enough retail traction, and we need this ICO hype in order to continue pumping the price of Bitcoin. But right now, he seems to be walking away from that, and that's the correct thing to do. I disagreed with Richard then. I said, you know what, I don't want all this shit on Bitcoin. I'm happy that it's on Ethereum. Let's keep it there. And I think now that Ethereum has had its technological issues because of all of these ICOs rushing into the blocks, I think Richard realizes that, yeah, having that on Bitcoin is not a good idea.
I'm not so sure he'd agree. I think he's seen what happened to Ethereum with the ICOs, and now he's curious to see what would happen to Bitcoin if Bitcoin had ICOs. To go back to the Mastercoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum discussion, Mastercoin was originally storing information in the Bitcoin blockchain. So every time they did that, it would get bigger, right? So the idea would Ethereum would store Bitcoin information in the blockchain and it would get bigger. Wouldn't it get just ridiculous, Jimmy? Not to say anything about transactions, but just all this extra information that they were storing.
Yeah, and this is something that I was for with color coins, and then we realized the market really wasn't there at the time, and we were a few years early. And I think to Vitalik's credit, he found the market and he marketed it very well, so that now the ICOs are launching every day on Ethereum. But I think the vision that we had for color coins was something very different, which was established businesses would be giving out shares of their stuff. This ICO phenomenon is very much let's raise the money and then go build a business. That's kind of opposite what I was. And I think a lot of people that were doing color coins, and to some degree some of these other projects were thinking. But to everybody's point, it's I don't think this was necessarily the core developers pushing him out, as much as him sort of wanting to raise a lot of money using this ICO model. And they had the famous address that you could send your Bitcoin to in order to get it, and it took them a while before you actually got your Ethereum. But if you did that, I think you did pretty well. But yeah, it's that's kind of the history, and I don't think it's entirely accurate to say he got pushed out by the core devs.
And then from a funding perspective, you pretty much have to create your own coin. Vitalik couldn't have just funded Ethereum on Bitcoin, could he? I mean, you can't print them, right?
Yeah, I mean that I guess RSK is kind of trying to do that with sidechains, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's not something you can necessarily if you did sort of build it on Bitcoin, that's kind of the major problem, and part of the doing so many ICOs is that you can't necessarily raise money and give away anything unless you're giving away a token. I would prefer if companies were more honest, they would give away equity, but then you get all these SEC things about you're trading securities now, you can't make them liquid, and you have to be an accredited investor and all this other stuff. So I mean, very sort of tricky thing, and why I don't know if this model necessarily works that well. I mean, obviously, it's great for people that are raising money and great for traders that are like getting in on the 5x pops that happen like the day after or whatever. But long term, this is why I remain skeptical of ICOs in general.
All right, let's check back in with the video here. Right now, the price of Bitcoin is $44.40 on Bitfinex. We switched to Finex from Stamp because it's just a little bit higher, so it makes it more exciting. But let's go on with Roger and Richard.
What you described is a larger version of that. Go ahead.
I said I don't think we disagree. I think we're on the same page here.
So my point is that there is always something deciding that someone's idea of the future is not going to happen. Usually it's the consensus network. But if the consensus network fails, then you fall over to social consensus, which is what you described in the F classic example. And can we both agree that you shouldn't roll back the chain? Isn't that the whole idea here?
Philosophically, I think both of us are in favor of not rolling back the chain. And you and I think that that's kind of the whole point, is not rolling back the chain and having an immutable ledger. But obviously a huge group of people disagreed with us and they rolled back the chain, and then the current version of Ethereum was born from that. So you and I agree on that point, but lots of others disagree, and we're perfectly willing to roll back the chain. And
it's all about rolling back the chain for you, but when the government makes you roll back the chain, you wish you didn't have the power. There's a reason Satoshi stepped back, and there's a reason Gavin stepped back. And it's because having the control to make changes comes with risk. Because someone, a not nice person, will put a gun to your head and say, you know what? I want to double spend this exchange transaction, and you're going to help. And that's the reason we need real distribution of parties, is for censorship resistance. Because if Bitcoin doesn't have censorship resistance, what does it have? A very expensive database. That's it.
We agree again.
All right. So, all right. We believe in not rolling back the chain. We believe in privacy. We believe in security. Let's go into...
I'd love to hear you address my argument in regards to that we have the empirical evidence and the giant track record of what works and is working incredibly well to grow Bitcoin versus going off on this theory.
Yep, you both be right, and there's a timing problem. You're both right, and there's a timing problem. You could probably increase the blocks to 2 to 4 to 20. You'd have more orphans. You'd have more centralization. There'd be more power in China. Large blocks are the reason we have empty blocks, unless you know something I don't. Empty blocks come from spy mining. When you spy on other mining pools, as though you're a miner for them, but really you're your own mining network. And then you get the data a little bit faster, and you start mining on the data that the pool gave you. But in actuality, you're going to release that block on your own and hope it outcompetes the one that they're working on. But it helps you to outcompete that by not including transactions in yours. So the reason that we have literal denial of service attacks in Bitcoin, literal 10-minute periods where no transactions can occur, is because of centralization. And that centralization gets worse the larger the blocks get, because the more profitable it is to be geographically and systematically commingled. So pools have done more to destroy the distribution of censorship resistance in Bitcoin than anything else. Because when you mine for a pool, you don't run a node. You are the bitch of the actual pool that runs a node, and they decide what the consensus rules are. And now you have no control, no say. You don't get to choose your developers. You don't get to choose what blocks are okay with you. You don't get to choose what transactions are okay with you.
You do get to choose in the sense that you can choose which pool you want to mine on.
Right, but how many pools are there that you can mine on that give you a variance that actually win a block once in a while enough? You see? So
maybe a dozen or 20, somewhere in that ballpark.
Not enough for $70 billion of value.
Right. So I think the best way to have more pools is to have more Bitcoin users with a more vibrant ecosystem, and the more people that are participating in Bitcoin, the more pool operators there are going to be, the more miners there's going to be, the more everything there's going to be. And in the earliest days, at one point maybe there were 5 pools total. And now we have 15 or 20 pools total that have more than 1% of the global hash rate. And I think if the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole is allowed to grow, we're going to see an even larger number of pools in the future.
You got it backwards. The maximum number of pools that ever existed was when everyone ran their own node and everyone had CPUs and GPUs. That was the maximum that ever existed. And the more money and the more participants and the more value that we've had, the more centralization in China we've had. And you can't even negotiate with these guys. They're not on Twitter. They're not on Reddit. They're not interacting with me. They're not interacting with core devs. They don't care to talk to you. They just care to run their mining software and have it auto flip from whatever chain is the most profitable. So even if you cared to negotiate with these guys, you'd also be having to negotiate with the logic of their auto flipping software, which is very risky for social consensus. Because let me tell you, the government of China decides one way, these guys are going to decide that way too, or die. And do you want to risk the health of the Bitcoin network on the government of China? I don't.
I'm much more concerned about the government of the United States causing trouble for people. The government of the United States has already thrown lots more people in jail for doing Bitcoin things than the government of China has. So I think our biggest fear should be from the United States government, not the Chinese government. And just like the United States, there's lots and lots of people with lots of different points of view. China's an even bigger country with about 4 times as many people as the United States, with a whole bunch of different viewpoints living all over the place. So I don't think it's fair to group all those people as if they're one monolithic entity. There's not. There's lots of people with very different views.
Within China, behind the same firewall. They're all behind the same firewall. And that firewall introduces latency. And the government does have control of an internet network there, and the power. You need a lot of power to run a lot of miners, and they decide what gets power and what doesn't.
And there's some really, really interesting ways in which cryptocurrencies can be used to tear down that Great Firewall of China. And the Great Firewall of China is this giant drag on the entire world's economy and slowing the entire world's rate of economic growth. And I'm looking forward to myself and a number of other Bitcoiners or cryptocurrency enthusiasts using our technology to literally tear down the Great Firewall of China and make it obsolete. So that's I'm hoping one thing that we can agree on as well would be good for the world.
Yeah, someone should put up satellites in the sky that beam the blockchain over the firewall, so it doesn't have to go through their control.
That would be nice.
Yeah,
I hear somebody might have been working.
All right, so we're going to pause again. Quite a lot happened there. Let me get headphones back in. So starting off, we had an agreement. They both agreed that they were against the Ethereum split. So let's identify that. We had a rare point of agreement. Then they started talking about centralization of pools, mining empty blocks. And then they started to talk about China and China versus the U.S. So Jimmy, where would you like
can I just briefly comment? Like somehow I missed did they both agree that the Ethereum split was bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can clearly go back to a tweet by Roger Ver where he said, look how great Ethereum split is. The combined value of the 2 forks is greater than the value of Ethereum was before. And I was one of the people that was critical of that tweet by Roger Ver.
I think we've learned a little bit more about hard forks given the recent one on Bitcoin. I'm not necessarily sure that that's wrong. But the point I wanted to make was that
Jimmy, and that's fine, right? Then Roger Ver should have said the Ethereum hard fork was a good thing, not a bad thing, right? Like again, I'm not criticizing his view here. I'm just criticizing the hypocrisy of the statement.
I think what he said was, I think he was criticizing, he didn't like it because it was sort of a centralized decision, not necessarily the fact that it was a hard fork. And I think
Roger would say he's agreeing with it philosophically, but at the same time, it made money. So on the side that it made money, it must be good. On the side philosophically, it could be bad. I see how both those can be true.
Yeah, and the thing that I wanted to point out, I actually agree with Roger on the fact that the U.S. government is probably actually more of an existential threat to Bitcoin than the Chinese government is. I mean, you could take away China, you lose a lot of hashing power, but that can always be made up if you get rid of it in the U.S. and start arresting a lot of the developers or something like that. I think that's a far more existential threat to the Bitcoin existence of Bitcoin. It could probably survive, but I think he's right on the point that the U.S. government has thrown a lot more people in jail for doing various things, and that could put a much bigger damper, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I'm not really going to be defending the Chinese government here, although I don't want to say anything overtly negative about them. And that's part of what's going on here. No, I would say the democratic United States, even with the current administration, is still much better than China. A lot of the things that Roger was being critical of, saying that China's monolithic or saying that they all believe the same things, they did have a cultural revolution. They did throw people in jail for making music. They are still technically a communist country. There's a lot of questionable things about China. And when they're talking about the power of electricity and that China can cut you off, I believe that's true. I believe you could get thrown into jail a lot faster in China and perhaps even disappear than you would in the U.S. I'm going to disagree on that point.
Well, I mean, but I don't know if it would be quite as disruptive as like losing a bunch of developers from the U.S. And I think Roger had a good point about like the Chinese miners, them not all having sort of the same opinion. I think we saw that with Bitcoin Cash. There was a small minority called via BTC that wanted to break off no matter what. There was another huge part of that mining conglomerate that just sort of stayed and mined Bitcoin instead. Now we're finding out that there's maybe 40% that will switch whatever based on whatever is more profitable. But you know, there's different factions within the mining community, and I think that's a fair point.
Hey, can we also talk about the empty blocks for a minute? Because
sure, Richard described them as spy mining. Roger seemed okay with them, right? Is that generally?
Yeah, I mean, that's the right of miners, is to mine whatever blocks they want. I mean, I think it would be nice for them to mine larger, like as big a block as they can, but they're more like, you know, I mean, we've seen with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, right? There's like a 40 or 50% of miners that will basically do whatever it takes to get the most profit for themselves. And if that profit means mining empty blocks and getting like a 20-30 second lead by spy mining, then and mining empty blocks as a result of that, then that's what they're going to do, and that's their right.
Right, and here's the thing, though, right? Like I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not okay with it because I think it's a bug in the system that allows them to do it, but I'm okay with them doing it. My problem is, once again, the hypocrisy of the situation. For example, again, credit where credit's due. Bitfury came out publicly a long time ago and said, we will not mine empty blocks because it hurts the Bitcoin ecosystem. We will always, you know, do our job in validating blocks that other people have found, and then we will start mining on top of those blocks. Yet BCC, again, I understand when your mining pool mines a block, you know it's valid, but nobody else knows that it's valid. That's why you get an advantage on mining the following block. And if you mine the following block before your block has fully propagated through the system and got accepted, it makes absolutely no sense for you to put transactions in that block because there's a high chance of them getting, you know, orphaned and stuff, right? So fine. If you have such a big mining dominance, you can, it almost makes sense for you to immediately start mining the next block. And if you find it so quickly, then, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the situation. What Richard is talking about is spy mining, is that other mining pools like BTC China, for example, they're not spending any time or effort validating Antpool's block, and they're trusting Antpool and immediately setting their mining gear on top of that block. So now they're competing with Antpool for an empty block. And where the hell are we gonna be if every single miner decides to be this like not care at all about the Bitcoin ecosystem? Then every block is going to be a freaking empty block. Then what the hell are we working with here, right? So obviously I will give credit and I will speak nicely about the mining pools that are validating these blocks. I will give a little bit of you know, leeway if you are the same miner who mined the previous block getting the empty block. Now, this creates this perverse advantage where you want the blocks to be, you want the firewall of China to be as complicated as possible, as big and as heavy as possible, so that you have the longest advantage of finding the block right after you found the previous block. So, and this is where the hypocrisy comes in, because Antpool only wants a bigger block so that they would have a bigger advantage on mining the following block. And it frustrates me to no end that people are, you know, supporting them in this venture of theirs and saying that it's okay.
Well, get ready, because I know later in the video, Roger starts saying something like ant miners need to shut off every 5 minutes and mine an empty block, or they catch on fire. So we'll see if you guys...
I think that's ridiculous.
All right, we'll see if you...
then it's a problem with their hardware, and they need to fucking change it.
It is a problem. Maybe they could just mine every other block. That'd be a good solution. Just turn them off for 10 minutes. The price of Bitcoin is $44.40. We've seen a little bit of upward price movement. We're back on Bitstamp. Bitstamp is evening out with Bitfinex, which is at 444.5. But back to the debate.
Got something like that.
Yeah, that's an
several years. No, Jeff Garzik, several years was working on exactly that. Myself and Eric Voorhees and a number of others actually contributed some money towards that. And I hear another company much more recently was involved in that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, it's important that even if you don't like them, you give them credit. They got it done. It works great, and it's a great asset to the ecosystem. So, I mean, I'm going to call out the blockchain guys for doing great work and not launching vaporware and not talking, but launching and having a usable thing that real people are doing real transactions on right now.
Are people using it for transactions?
Well, not a ton because it just came out, but anyone that wants to can. There are transactions that have been done on it. You can go on Twitter, it's cool. So basically you can receive the whole blockchain over the satellite, and then you can SMS your private key out, and it's only like a few kilobyte. So you can use SMS to transmit. You can use blockchain to receive.
SMS the signed transaction out? Not your private key, hopefully.
Right, exactly. Yeah, sorry, what Roger said is accurate there. So you can literally use the blockchain and Bitcoin if the internet goes down anywhere in the world, like now. That's sweet. Like, that's amazing.
You can block your SMS transactions with your
so then you just can encrypt that, right? You can make it look like a cat picture using stenography. They're not going to block your cat pictures. So, the core team, they are the best at what they do. So, I mean, I guess I'm going to defend the core team here. Unless you want to talk about it. Yeah. So your options, here's your options. We could talk about how bad the fork really is. We could talk about how good the core team is. We could talk about worshiping Satoshi and appeals to authority. We could talk about the community in RBTC. We could talk about your control over that community and becoming the next Themios, which is not very libertarian-like. We could talk about CSW, his fake computer.
Let's pick one.
You choose, man. They're all good for me, dude.
Sure. So
let's use the one that's best for the audience, I guess. I mean, like you and I just getting smarter.
Sure, but we can see what people want to talk about? Or?
You're never going to win a rechat, believe me. You're not going to win a rechat. It's just going to be
I won't open it in that case. Let's talk about, I think, deifying Satoshi and Satoshi's vision and this and that. It's not that Satoshi's God, it's that we have, 8 years of empirical evidence that his system worked and worked incredibly well to grow Bitcoin. Why wouldn't we follow on the same path that we know for sure works to grow Bitcoin to become incredibly popular all over the world? Why wouldn't we continue on that same path?
So I think Satoshi's a sellout, and I think that he could burn his private keys now and not risk the future economy of the world with an unknown party holding 10% of it, who may have given those keys to his kid, and his kid might be the next Hitler. Or he may have gotten a mental illness and gotten wacky himself. Or he has some other socially dangerous beliefs, and he decides to use the 10% net worth that he holds of the planet and whatever you gave him with the BCC fork and the coming V2X fork and the airdrops from Byteball and Lumens. And this guy's accruing a lot of money, and he's a variable that we're unaware of that chose to get out of the game when no one else did, right? He could just burn his keys.
It's all Lumens at airdrops
right now. Yeah, Lumens get airdrops. Yeah, I'm getting you rich, man. Get your Lumens, get your Byteballs. You're welcome, bro. I think I give you 1% on the Lumens. So, Satoshi could still be here if he was alive. He could still be guiding us. He could still be helping us. He could be renouncing his control of his keys, but he's not, which means he's either a bitch or he's dead. Those are the only two options I'm aware of. Now,
so let's say I concede every point that you just made there, which I don't necessarily do, but just for argument's sake. That didn't answer my question at all. My question was, we have a 9-year track record of exactly what worked incredibly well to grow Bitcoin from nothing to where we are today. And that was having fast, cheap, easy to use transactions and let the blocks grow from 10 kilobytes to 20 kilobytes to 50 kilobytes, all the way up till 1 megabyte. And it wasn't until we hit the 1 megabyte limit that the adoption rate trailed off and Bitcoin started losing market share to competing cryptocurrencies, and the user experience became horrible. So we have the empirical evidence with a 9-year track record of worked well. Why wouldn't we follow in that same course? Why are we changing courses to something that may not work? We have no empirical evidence of.
I understand. Well, you're not gonna have a lot of empirical evidence in crypto because we just got here. So we're working with limited empirical evidence on nearly any single thing that we do. This is all cutting edge stuff. And on the cutting edge,
have 9 years track record for how we grew Bitcoin from nothing to where it is today.
So you're cherry picking two things. First, you're cherry picking that fees are the reason other cryptos did well. Basically, like robbing those cryptos of any other mimetic advantage or technical advantage or marketing team advantage. You're just saying Bitcoin had high fees, and that's the only reason these other cryptos became valuable. If you talk
to be fair, I think if I can add what exactly my argument is, the fees are a side effect. What I think really caused the other cryptocurrencies to take off was when Bitcoin blocks became full, you no longer had certainty that your transaction was going to be confirmed. And the uncertainty of when your transaction is going to go through is an even bigger problem than the high fees. So I think I get to see support tickets from lots of businesses.
I wouldn't be surprised if you pumped the value of those coins. I mean, you let Bcash be brought into the world, a 20% pre-mined, impossible to detect inflation altcoin. You funded that, right? So it's to some degree, like,
yeah, and I can tell you the reason for that though is everyone's busy arguing over Bitcoin scalability and how to scale Bitcoin at the moment. But the big giant other problem that's looming for Bitcoin is fungibility. Bitcoin is not nearly as fungible as it needs to be, and fungibility is just another friendlier sounding name for anonymity, right? The more private Bitcoin is, the better the money it is. And that's another area that's really, really lacking with Bitcoin. And small blocks make that problem worse. When governments or whoever are trying to search for transactions, they're looking for a needle in a haystack. We want them to be looking at a needle for a great big giant haystack rather than a little tiny 1 megabyte haystack. So
yeah, they can't.
That's another problem that's caused by small blocks.
Look, I agree with that. And if it wasn't 20% pre-mined, and if it had detectable inflation that you could detect if the coin broke, I would have been happy to fund it too. But those two things are deal breaker for me.
All right, we're going to just pause there and recap what we've seen so far. Let's turn up the screen share. No. All right, so going back, they started off, they were talking about the blockchain satellites. They could use SMS transactions to send. Roger said they could block SMS. Richard said they could use cat pictures. They talked about Satoshi a little bit. Richard has the theory that Satoshi could be dead, but might have handed the Bitcoins, essentially 10% of all Bitcoins, off to his children. Richard doesn't know anything about Satoshi's children. Maybe they're bad people. They talked a little about lumens and byte balls getting rewards for their Bitcoins. Satoshi's either a bitch or he's dead. And then Roger said that he had 9 years growing Bitcoin transactions because they were fast and cheap. And I want to directly address that. I say, or perhaps it was the price going up. We had 9 years of the price of Bitcoin going up, which is always good advertisement. I don't know necessarily it had to do with the fast and cheap transactions. If people are buying once and storing it in a cold wallet and not worrying about it. And then we went back into the fees are the reasons other cryptos did well. And then we started getting a little into the anonymous coins issues and fungibility. Jimmy, what do you think there? Where do you want to start?
Well, so I'm not really that interested. I mean, satellite stuff's cool and all that, but I mean that's it's in its infancy. I don't think it's worth arguing about right now. The part that I want to address is this whole argument about Bitcoin's track record over the last 9 years. We do have a very good track record, but we know that it went from certain price to certain price. But let's look at the last year. We actually went from something like 800. I think a year ago it was maybe like 700 or something like that, up to right now it's like 4,000. Much of that was without any sort of scaling solution, right? Like it was just sort of, it's gone up and up and up, and
No,
maybe the first thing.
Whoa. I'm gonna push back on that. I mean, yeah, you're right. At the very end of last year, like in November, the price of Bitcoin was still $700-800, and now we're about to cross all-time high. We're at 4460, and I would say a lot of that is because of a scaling solution. Because this is where me being a trader, I always say speculation. You buy the rumor and you sell the news, and this entire run-up has been that scaling solution is going to happen. That's what's been driving the price up. If the scaling solution did not happen this past month, the price probably would have been back to the $500-600 area, even lower than where the pump started. But the pump is a direct result of the scaling solution on speculation.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say that like
plus the halving.
Right. The Roger's sort of argument is we have 9 years of a track record of doing X, and therefore we should continue doing X. I mean, I feel some sympathy for that argument, but I think correlation is not causation. And I especially the last year, it seems to me that fees were relatively high, and price kept going up, and adoption kept going up, marketing kept going up, and all this other stuff. So I'm not sure. I mean, maybe first 7 years, his argument might hold. The last two, I don't think it does. So that's just the comment I would have there.
Well, the comment that I really want to say is, it's like, I think it's so ingenuous when Roger is saying that, well, we haven't been able to scale. We've been arguing this for 2 years, and mostly because of him, because he's been supporting these non-popular scaling solutions, from Bitcoin Classic to Bitcoin XT to being the lead supporter or lead driver of Bitcoin Unlimited. And I don't believe the fact that he's, slightly supporting Bcash. I think he's completely supporting Bcash. And if Bcash doesn't, fulfill what he thinks is going to fulfill, he will quickly switch over to the 2x support. So one of the main reasons why we've been debating scaling and we haven't scaled in the last year and a half was the direct result of Roger and what he's been doing. So I think it's like for someone else to say it, it would be okay. But for him to say it, I find it very, disingenuous.
All right. We also talked about the anonymity coins that they're starting to get into right now. It just seems like, yeah, there's going to be more alts trying these things out. I don't think it's because of Bitcoin's fees going up that they started Dash or Darkcoin or Monero or any of these projects. I think they chose to start them on their own. Going back to Roger's idea that Vitalik could have just easily built Ethereum on Bitcoin, do you guys think they could have easily built Zcash or Dash or any of these projects on Bitcoin?
I think it would have been impossible for them to build it on Bitcoin. It's just like it's impossible for any current ICO from not almost any, but from Vinny Lingham to Reggie Middleton on down. No one is going to give them even 5% of the kind of money they earned from the ICO if they didn't create their own money or securities out of thin air. So it's the same thing here. There's almost no reason to build Ethereum on Bitcoin because it takes a huge effort. And where do you get the funding? I'm still amazed that Rootstock has gotten as far as they did, and they haven't even launched yet, right? Like, it's not that it's a double-sided question whether it's technologically possible and whether there is technologically possible whether there is a business need. And who the hell is going to spend 2 years developing something unless they can, create their own money? So there's absolutely almost no incentive to build something this speculative on top of Bitcoin because no one's going to pay you to do it.
Well, I would kind of disagree, but I also agree. There is a tech that you could use to do a lot of these like altcoinish things, and that's sidechains. Paul Stork has literally put in a couple of years into making that happen, and part of the reason
exactly. Oh no, Jimmy, that's exactly my point. Paul Stork has already spent several years trying to do it, and they're not out yet, right? As opposed to an ICO where you can get it out in 2 weeks and collect your millions, right? This is the thing, and even when Paul Stork, or if Paul Stork is able to achieve his dream, he will not get rich from it, right? He probably won't because he doesn't get a cut of those transactions like Zcash is from the mining. Paul Stork is not going to say, oh, and 2% of every single transaction on the sidechain goes into my personal Bitcoin wallet, right? This is the problem.
Well, I'm not so sure about that because at least from reading Drive Chains and what he's planning to do with Truth Coin after Drive Chains are out. So what you could do on a sidechain is have a one-to-one peg with Bitcoin, but you can also have a native currency to that sidechain on top of it. So that could sort of be a way to fund it or something like that. And I could see that becoming more popular. It is possible. It's just the tech just isn't there yet, and people aren't patient enough to go for the thing with the most security in the technology. But I mean, RSK is a great example, right? Like you could do an ICO on RSK sidechain if that ever comes to pass. I don't know if or when it's going to happen, and I'm not even sure I would even support any of those ICOs because I'm not sure how things are going to be structured and things like that. But the possibility of the technology is certainly there. It's just it takes a lot of effort to do it correctly and with the level of security that we're used to in Bitcoin. And the reason why a lot of these other coins I don't think are just as secure because they're utilizing a lot of technology that's a little bit unknown and things like that. And they have a lot of their own problems.
Right, and again, going back to my point earlier, if Rootstock never launches, if Rootstock fails, no one from that project gets to walk away with millions of dollars. Yet all of these other altcoins and scam coins and ICOs, it's irrelevant whether these projects fail or not. If the person launching them has, 2 cents, like a couple of brain cells, he would have cashed out some millions by now, and then it's irrelevant whether the project succeeds or fails. This is the main difference between a VC-funded company where you can't just cash out with the money without developing anything, and a grassroots open source developer project where most people are volunteers because they believe in the technology.
I agree with Tone on that. I know several of the Augur guys, and while Augur's still not out and they're doing great work on it, and maybe you pay a programmer 100 grand a year, they've already been paid 10 times that. So I guess they're going to keep working on the project, and I guess everything's going to be fine. But yeah, you're certainly paying up front. The idea we've talked about before, if you paid a restaurant 10 years worth of profits and then said, now work really hard to be a restaurant, I imagine most of them would shut it down and go to the beach. So
yeah, I don't know. It's kind of it's flipped a VC model on its head. Usually you have a business that has some momentum first. Instead, you generate all the momentum from the fundraise, and you're supposed to ride on that momentum instead of getting continuous pushes through customer acquisition and things like that. This is a completely different model. I'm still kind of skeptical of it. I think Tone and you are as well. But yeah, Tone, do you want to say something about the price? Because I did notice that it hit a new hourly high.
We did. We hit a nice, let me do a share screen. We hit a nice hourly high, but then we immediately pulled back. Now, I'm not a big fan of hourly candles. I think they're very, very noisy. I never get scared of candles that end at the high and then immediately reverse. I'm still thinking that this next hour will still, go back up above 44.60 on Bitfinex. The only other thing I'm watching on this hourly candle is this count along the bottom in green, and it made it to a 9, and I'm just watching it getting to a 13. That might cause a little bit of a momentum pause. On the Bitstamp charts, we hit a new high of 4,450. So we are literally $30 away from the all-time high on Bitstamp. So this is pretty exciting. Hopefully, we will see a new all-time high by the time we finish with the debate video.
all right, let's get back to the debate. Here we go.
Anyway, so my point
nice
is,
part about okay, go ahead.
yeah, so my point is, a lot of rich crypto guys are the reason that those things had a spike to make them interesting, to give other people in the normal public a reason to find them more interesting. Look, we both agree we want lower fees. So let's just talk about fees, right?
Okay. Because the core team disagrees with both of us on that, then if you're saying you want.
For a very specific reason. So I said that you cherry picked the reason that we lost market share. Now I'm going to say that your share. Well, right now, all those other things don't perform any commerce functions. So if it was really a replacement good, as you advertise, then it would be used as a replacement. But Bitcoin shares no utility replacement value with the pump and dump ICOs. There is no retail adoption. There are no retail wallets. These people don't even take the coins off exchange. I think
you're conflating ICOs with other competing cryptos, and I'll give you an example from my own life. So there's a website called bitcart.io that I used to love to buy Amazon gift cards from with Bitcoin. Now you would get a 15% discount for Amazon gift cards using Bitcoin. And as of, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, when the network became really, really full, they stopped accepting Bitcoin, and they only were accepting, I believe, Dash and Ethereum. And so that's a real world use case of businesses shifting away from Bitcoin to competing altcoins, which I think are different than ICOs.
Right. You're 100% right. The increase in fees prices Bitcoin out of a lot of markets. And even though you're 100% right, the amount of dollars and liquidity and pump that comes from actual retail darknet market usage, and you, the #1 Bitcoin user in the world's usage, is like 3 to 5% of the total market cap. So you're right. Anyone that actually does do Bitcoin commerce, which is almost nobody, might have to switch to currencies.
I really disagree that there's not many people using Bitcoin for commerce, and anybody can take a look at just how many people are using Bitcoin for commerce by going over to blockchain.info and watch the transactions scrolling by. Those are real people using Bitcoin to move real amounts of money around the world. And we don't necessarily know what they're using it for, but if you see it moving, there's some sort of economic activity going on behind it. At $5 a transaction or $8 a transaction, they're not moving it just for fun. They're doing it because they're performing some sort of economic activity with it.
If you wanted to buy a car with Bitcoin, there was one company in the States that had scale. They went out of business. There's maybe 1 or 2 small shops like near Butterfly Labs in Kansas City, there was a shop that like accepted Bitcoin. There's maybe one in California, maybe one in Florida. Like I love Bitcoin as much as the next guy, but I'm not willing to pretend that it's not 1,000 times less places you can spend it. And I'm being generous with 1,000. It's probably
I think you're really missing the picture. There's more than 200,000 merchants in Japan that accept Bitcoin. I can walk down the street to the electronics store and use Bitcoin in the store. I can walk down the street to the equivalent of like Macy's or something in the US and spend Bitcoin here in Japan. There's all sorts of restaurants, there's all sorts of stuff, there's all sorts of websites. I book more hotels on Expedia in Bitcoin, than I can count each year. There's a huge amount of commerce that's being used with the Bitcoin network. And the fact that it costs $8 per transaction to do it, and yet the blocks are still completely full, shows just how big of a demand there is for people to use Bitcoin in real world commerce.
All right. So you think there's a lot of commerce. Maybe in Japan there is. I don't think there's a lot. We'll move on.
Do you have a theory as to why people would be moving the Bitcoins at $8 per transaction if they're not doing commerce with it? Why are they spending $8 every time they move Bitcoin and it's all the blocks completely full? What are they doing if it's not commerce?
Well, yeah, I don't know. That's the whole idea, is we're not supposed to
commerce. People are using Bitcoin to pay people all over the world. And when the network became full and the user experience became not as good as it used to be with Bitcoin, people started exploring alternatives like Dash and Monero and Ethereum and things like that.
Yeah,
and that's a direct result of
there's other alternatives too, like Visa and MasterCard and Swift.
Yeah, and people are using that sometimes now instead of Bitcoin, whereas previously they would have used Bitcoin.
Yeah, so we agree. We both like to see Bitcoin fees be very low, and that everyone accept it and use it. We're both on the same thing, right?
So the Blockstream team want the exact opposite. They openly say they want Bitcoin fees to be high. They want Bitcoin transactions to be easy to double spend, and they want the blocks to be full all the time, which leads to uncertainty as to when a transaction is going to be confirmed.
All right, just another second here, and we'll do another pause. All right, to recap what we heard, we were talking mainly about commerce and retail. We started a little bit about ICOs versus altcoins. Then we talked about how BitCart doesn't take Bitcoin anymore. The increase of fees, according to Roger, has driven the Bitcoiners out of retail, yet at the same time, lots of people are moving transactions on blockchain.info. They're moving small amounts for $5 to $8, which sounds like Roger's doubling the fees. I've never seen anything above $3 to $5. And he says there's a lot of commerce. Why are they paying so much to move Bitcoin? And they're paying people all over the world. And then he says it's broken and that they could just use Dash or Ether or something. But if it really was that simple to switch, we'd see more sites switching, more sites losing Bitcoin. If people are paying person to person, I guess they could choose other things. Jimmy, what did you think?
Well, I think, first of all, Richard got his ass whooped on this part of the debate. And Roger made some very good points. As a debate, like just sort of observing objectively that part, he got whooped on that part. But I mean, Richard did better on other parts, but this part, I think Roger won. But that said, let's go back to the argument. He said that, well, if these blocks are full, why, like what is it if it isn't transactions? They are transactions, and that's okay. That means that a lot of people want to transact. To his point, maybe there are people that are getting priced out of transacting on something like coffee or whatever. But I personally think that's okay, right? Like there are people that want to do very low value transactions. We used to have a lot of spam on the network, right? Like Satoshi Dice used to have like a single Satoshi transaction because people just like gambling or whatever. And this is partly why we wanted a fee market, because we don't want a lot of these spam transactions. And like, where to sort of draw that line and figure out when you don't want a certain transaction because it's so low value and it's spammy versus when it's actual economic activity is not an easy question to answer. This is something that requires requires the market to figure out. And this is what a lot of core developers call the fee market. And I think Roger sort of misconstrued what the core developers were saying. It's not that they want high fees. They want there to be a market so that you price out the spam. I mean, think about your email inbox. There's a lot of spam in there. There's a lot of emails that you'd rather not get. Obviously, if you use Gmail or something like that, they filter out a lot of that stuff based on like smart algorithms and stuff. But a part of why it's so easy for a spammer to send spam is because it really doesn't cost anything. But if you have a cost to something, then you necessarily have to figure out if it's worth it for you. Now, would it be better if fees were less than $5 or something like that? Probably. It would stir more economic activity. But there's a lower limit to that too. You don't want it to be so low that there's a lot of spam. And really that part is for the market to decide. Is this transaction worth it for me? And is this like sort of spamming the blockchain and sort of doing useless transactions that don't really mean anything versus something that's that's more useful? And this is where you know, I think Roger, he made a good point, and he absolutely defeated Richard Hart in this part of the debate. But I would say that it's a lot more subtle than, well, you know, it should be low because it allows more transactions. Not every transaction is the same, and certain ones should be sort of like priced out of the system for a good reason.
And I would say, though, as someone that has worked for a retail Bitcoin business, it's incredibly difficult to get people to spend their Bitcoin. We were offering very large discounts at the place I used to work, 20 to 30% off Amazon at some times. It was a little difficult to order at times, but people wouldn't want to order. They'd say, I'm holding my Bitcoin. I have them in my private wallet. Also, we have Bitcoin meetups all the time. They just offered a $2 off drinks at this bar. It's a very good deal. But yet again, people didn't have the Bitcoin on their wallet. They had it at home in their cold storage. They're not going to spend it, is my take from my experience.
And Thomas, if you recall, I was one of the critics of that company, telling people that it's not worth it for you to save 20, 30% to spend your Bitcoins. I was critical for other reasons. I mean, other than replenishing your Bitcoin, I was more critical for fungibility reasons, but it doesn't matter. Like, I would never use my Bitcoin for the discount. I would only use my Bitcoin when I want to protect my identity, not the complete opposite of that to save some money. So, but that's my personal view on it. Hey, Jimmy.
Well, it gets worse and worse if you go to sites that might have the word local in your name, and you can get all kinds of other discounts. So there are lots of Bitcoin discount opportunities, but people usually rebuy or don't want to spend.
Right. So Jimmy, you actually made a couple of good points. I want to address those first, and then I'm going to mention the debate a little bit. So it's good that you mentioned Satoshi Dice, because when I got into Bitcoin and I bought my very first Bitcoins, I paid for it with an envelope of cash at some coffee shop. But once I had the Bitcoin, I wanted to see, you know, like, how does this work? How can I use it? And the first transaction I ever did on my own, besides buying the coins, was on Satoshi Dice. And I knew nothing. Like, I was a total noob. This is like, okay, let me, you know, try to, you know, use it for something. And the only thing I can think of at the time was placing a gambling bet, which is one of the reasons I got it to begin with. But since there wasn't anything to bet on at that moment in time, I went and used Satoshi Dice. And I remember thinking to myself, knowing nothing about, I mean, I've never heard the word mempool before. I barely understood mining. I understood nothing about the technology, nothing. And I'm like, why the hell would they send you one Satoshi if you lose the bet? Well, like, I remember that was the first question I like asked myself out loud. This seems like a very dumb thing to do. And I knew nothing at the time. I knew nothing, okay? And that seemed to be very, very, very silly, okay? So that's one thing. I forgot the other thing I was going to comment on that you said about that. But here's where Richard could have, you know, done a better argument. In that, when Roger says that the core developers want high fees, I don't understand why the immediate rebuttal in it, well, no, the core developers want 0 fees because they want to give you the Lightning Network, which is what segregated witness will give you, in which case the fees will drop insanely. And both Jihan and ViaBTC are on record that they are against Segwit because they make Bitcoin transactions incredibly cheap with mining fees. So this is just such a silly argument that I don't understand how people continue to make it. You can't say Core wants big fees when people that want big blocks are saying they don't want Segwit because they're going to reduce fees to be too small. Like, I mean, like, this convoluted logic just like makes me insane.
I mean, I did read those tweets from Jihan saying, you know, Segwit is against big blockers, but he's also said, I like Lightning Network. Lightning is good for the miners. And
he's also, but he's also said he's not using ASIC boost, right? Like, it's
Well, you can't cherry pick some of his quotes and not show the other ones, right? Because like,
well, no, I'm not. Well, that's the thing, right? Like you have to look at the quotes that actually make sense, you know, not the ones that are obvious lies.
Well, I think they both make sense, because there is an argument to be made that if you are using the Lightning Network, the funding transaction and the closing transaction will generally have higher fees because it's absolutely critical that they get in at the blocks that they do. So in a way,
but the middle transactions, will have insanely tiny. Right. Mm-hmm. So this is the cherry picking of the argument. You can't pick one side over the other. Now, I understand the fact that once Lightning Network is fully operational, yeah, we're going to have high fees on opening and closing the Lightning Network channel, and very, very tiny fees in the middle. And you have to understand how that system works. And you can't be cherry picking. Like, again, I'm not saying the core developers want to eliminate fees altogether. And I'm not saying the core developers want high fees. They want it to be both. They want it to be optimal. Sometimes the fee needs to be high, and sometimes the fee needs to be zero. But this is what Roger is doing. He's cherry picking one side of the Lightning Network and not the middle. And Jihan is accusing Segwit of being bad because he's cherry picking the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is right, that there is sort of an optimum that the core developers are trying to get to. And again, you don't want spam transactions that cost nothing, because then, you know, people will spam the network. I remember back during the Sochi Olympics, there was like, there were all these transactions for 1 Satoshi each to like every holder of more than a Bitcoin or something like that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. That's what I was going to mention, Jimmy. Like, Roger keeps saying, oh, there were too many Bitcoin transactions, that's why people left. And it's like, no, they were blatantly spam. And I know they were spam, and I've been saying that on all my videos, because when I broke into my 2013 private keys, don't know if that was a good idea or not. I mean, those coins were very off the grid, but I was greedy and wanted to sell that Bcash. And I opened up this wallet, and like the last transaction in this private key that I made was 2013. And I'm like, how the hell did Satoshis get into this wallet 4 months ago? Yeah. My wallet got spammed with Satoshis. So don't give me your righteous argument that too many people were using Bitcoin and it was congested. It was an obvious spam attack. It just wasn't obvious to people because they were spamming old private keys that had a lot of, you know, Bitcoin, like unused days in them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to sort of make the argument. You don't want fees to be as low as possible, like these guys are saying. I think you do want the market to figure out what's spam and what's not, and price is the best way to figure that out, at least that we know of.
I mean, you want them as low as possible on a Lightning channel because they're not hitting the protocol.
Yeah. So there's no real cost there's no socialized cost there, right? Like with a spam transaction, there is some socialized cost because everybody that's running a node has to receive it, validate it, store it, all that stuff. Whereas with something like Lightning, there's no socialized cost. It's very marginal, and it's the cost of bandwidth or a couple of CPU ticks and stuff like that. It's not a permanent socialized cost where spam transactions tend to be. So you have to strike that balance, and I really wish Richard made that point there. We can go back to the video or do price analysis, or Thomas, you got something?
Let me point to a price, but Thomas, you have something up.
Yeah, the price is 44.22. Looks like it dipped to 44.01. We're watching Bitfinex. The recent high was 44.64. What do you think, Tone?
Well, again, if we broke out of this channel right here, again, I hate hourly charts, especially in this type of environment. But the way things look,
you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, my bad.
Here's the hourly chart. Looks like a big red candle to me.
Right. So we have a big red candle, but when you zoom out, right, I drew this channel this morning just as we were breaking out of this channel. This actually looks very, very clean. Again, I don't like the hourly charts because they're a little choppier than other charts, but we did break out above the channel the exact same length as the size of the channel. And this is actually, let me see if I can draw this real quick, right? So if I do a price range of this channel, just ballpark it, right? Like this price range was about $100, I have about $90, right? So then if I do it again, if I grab this price range on the breakout, right? And we went up approximately $90. So this is perfect. You break out the size of the channel, then you pull back right into the channel. This is actually exactly what you want to see from a breakout. You met your target. You met your $90 target, which was the size of the channel. You then go back and you touch the channel, which was resistance, now support. And then from there, you would break out to the upside. So this is kind of what I'm looking for.
All right, and I think we're going to head back to the debate, but I wanted to do a quick thank you for our donors. We've had some recent donors. We had a 0.00212678, a 0.023569, and a 0.003. Thanks to everybody for donating Bitcoin to this address. It's the same address right here on the right side. And thanks to our chat for sticking in there. We have 1,359 live viewers. Go ahead, Jimmy.
That top one is the one that I sent. It's the 3AV. That's a Segwit transaction.
Oh, a Segwit transaction. Ooh.
Yeah.
You think it would be in a different color or something?
Well, I think if you click on the transaction, it'll show you something. Not that one. Yeah, there. And if you, where is it? Show scripts and Coinbase. Click that.
Whoa.
So you can see that it has a witness right there, and it knows that it's got a little bit of witness data, and that's how you know it's a Segwit transaction.
Can I get a witness? Hell yeah.
And we're once again trending ahead of our last nemesis at number 1. Unfortunately, we are not beating the live views of the hurricane. That would be nice. The live stream.
Yeah, that's headed my way this weekend. So that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, so the hurricane is beating us. We are almost tied with Bloomberg for the number of live views. They're at 1,500 and we're at 1,300.
A hurricane is a very tough thing to beat, but NASA, we can take them down. Everyone give us a thumbs up and a share so that we can try to take down Bloomberg too.
I'm really curious why the following is my second recommended thing to watch at the moment.
Why are you watching Peppa Pig, man?
I don't even know what that is. What is it?
It's a kid's show.
It's a kid's show. They have like British accents.
Oh, Peppa.
Yeah. I don't understand why this is on my channel, and I don't play video games at all. I've never watched a single like video game video, so I'm not sure why that is the third or fourth recommended thing for me personally.
More and more you see things on YouTube like 24 hours of this TV show streaming.
I'm going to guess
that's the only people using live video.
Yeah, I mean, it might be some crossover between Bitcoin people and Peppa Pig viewers. So I don't know. Maybe that's the case.
Oh, Peppa, I've got a virus. Something's wrong with my computer. All right, back to the debate. Here we go. Some more fast pitch, high talking from Roger and Richard. Oops.
Those guys want the exact opposite. Why would you be supporting their roadmap, the future of Bitcoin?
Because they're not a monolith, and there's interior conflict amongst their ranks. Let me give you an example.
Please.
Greg Maxwell, he's all right with the 1 megabyte limit. Luke Jr., he's not. He says we only get 17% more processing per year, but the blockchain grows faster than that, so he wants to knock it down to 300. No one else on the team agrees with that, right? So Luke Jr. is on his own, with tonal numbering and his 300 kilobyte limit.
Geocentric theory, and he's on his own.
He's on his own with a lot of stuff, right? So the majority of developers do not agree with him on the, I won't say majority, but his most public controversial opinions, right? Now,
but I do think that for the most part, there's consensus among the Blockstream core developers that they want to have a fee market right now that creates high fees.
Well, I can explain it to you. I'm going to. I've prepared for this.
Okay,
so
I'm ready.
You are correct that you could have lower fees with larger blocks now. You would get more of the same problem, which when you cherry picked, you missed out on, which was the centralization, which was causing empty blocks. the centralization is the result of the block sizes being what they are. The bigger they get, the more empty blocks get mined, and the more centralization exists.
The empty blocks are actually just a way of the network slowing down so that everybody can keep up. So the reason an empty block takes place is one pool finds a block, and then the other pools that are spy mining on it, they see the header, and they can start mining on the header right away until they have received the entire block and they validated that block. Then they can toss a bunch more transactions in there and mine a block that has a bunch of transactions. So the fact that one full block is found here, and then 2 seconds later, while spy mining, another empty block is found. The full block takes 5-10 seconds to validate. The empty block with just the Coinbase can be validated almost instantly, and the next block won't be found for maybe 10 minutes after that. So it slows down the entire network so everybody can kind of keep up. So it's actually a way of making sure everybody can keep up with what's happening on the network, and I don't see it as a bad thing at all.
That sounds like miners stealing money for pretending to do the work of verifying transactions and just getting paid for nothing.
The only other option is when one pool finds a block and the other pool hasn't received the entire block and hasn't validated it, is for them to not mine at all during that period. So rather than not mining at all, they still continue to mine. And if they find a block within, let's say, that 10-second window, they mine an empty block. So the only other option to mining an empty block is to not mine at all. And so I think it would be better for them to mine that empty block.
From the pool of miner rewards. If you're not performing useful work, you are harming them. They're getting paid.
That's still useful work because they're adding more work onto the tip of the blockchain, which makes the blockchain just that much more difficult to go back and rewrite.
Yeah, Roger has a mining company, and he's apparently good buddies with the guy who makes mining equipment. I found that it's very hard to make these types of ethical arguments against biased understanding.
Make it again, and I'll try to understand it, because I don't think I understood where the theft was coming in. I think I heard you use the word stealing.
Your model is that it's no big deal that this block happened because for some reason it's better that the network be slow. And then you also said that we're also going to instantly find another block at the same time. And I'm not sure that either of those two things is actually the case. And if those two things—
these empty blocks are happening, or 99% of the time is when it's found right after another block. And that's, if you look at these empty blocks, they're found at almost identical time to another block. And so that node hasn't received the full block, and they're not able to mine on top of that other than just mining on the header. So that's why you're seeing these empty blocks.
Someone's getting paid to mine on a header when they could have just not, right?
They could have not mined at all. That's the option.
Right.
Either they don't mine at all,
yeah,
or they mine on the header for that 10-second period.
Okay,
and I'll tell you another reason. So like the Bitmain S7s, for example, if they all of a sudden, when they have 1,000+ watts going into one of these mining machines, if the internet cuts off or they stop mining all of a sudden, they have a tendency to literally catch on fire and burst into flames, and that's a big problem in a data center. So just from a technical standpoint, it's not feasible for these machines to stop mining for those 10-second periods, because you don't want them to catch on fire. And as someone that's involved with the data centers for these, we try to avoid having fires in the data centers, especially electrical fires.
Yeah. So my point is, you could be entirely correct, and Gavin Anderson could be entirely correct, and the network could operate with larger blocks now, and it would lower the fees for a while. And maybe if lower fees increased adoption, which I don't think is the case, then
you don't
be
think
right.
lower fees increased adoption? Did I hear you say that?
Well, I think that we had a bunch of transactions on the network, and then they disappeared the second the Segwit 2x agreement was signed. And I think that someone, perhaps a miner, was just pumping transactions into blocks to make it look like we needed to have resolution immediately, because it cost them less, because the fees that they paid to mine those transactions into those blocks, they were getting on the other end anyway as block rewards and as fees on the other side. So to me, because of the timing, when those transactions disappeared, I don't believe that those were real transactions that were filling up the blocks. And let me tell you something else. You talk about how good I don't even know what you want to call it. You want to call it BCC, BCH, Bcash? You choose.
There's a lot of going back and forth in this debate. But let's go ahead and stop. Let's replay a little bit. So we were talking about a lot of things. First, they were talking about Blockstream is not a monolith. It's Luke Jr. disagrees with Greg Maxwell. Luke Jr. has a lot of his own opinions on a lot of things. Then we talked a little bit about how they could get lower fees with bigger blocks, but Richard's argument is that that would have more of the same problem, more centralization, more empty blocks. Roger started saying something about how the empty blocks are good. They slow the network. They keep the network healthy. Richard kept saying they were stealing when they mined empty blocks. A little bit of Roger's friends with miners. And then the very interesting explanation by Roger that S7s catch on fire if they do not slow down and mine empty blocks. Then we got into the heat of the argument where do lower fees increase adoption? And then a little bit of the spam transactions where Richard posited that the miners could have been spamming the network because they know they would get the money back because they were the only ones mining the blocks. So Jimmy, where would you like to start in this?
Well, so let me talk a little bit about spy mining. The way it works is that if you receive the block header from another miner, and you can do that in headers only mode, you can mine immediately on top of it because you can validate the proof of work very quickly. It's just one hash cycle, and you can say, okay, that definitely validates. And then you can use that as the previous block in your new block header as part of the block template that you need in order to mine. But the unfortunate thing is you're probably going to have to mine an empty block. Why? Because you don't know what transactions were in that previous block. So if you accidentally include the same transaction, then your block's invalid. Or if you're trying to include other transactions and the ancestor was supposed to be in the previous block but it wasn't, you get into all sorts of problems like that. So that's sort of why people are mine these empty blocks, is because they have those 10 to 15 seconds where you need to receive the entire 1 megabyte block and validate these transactions and make sure they're out of your mempool. If they're still in your mempool, then you're going to screw up and your block is not going to be mined, or your block is not going to be valid. So it makes sense that empty blocks do exist for that reason, because you need, during those 10 or 15 seconds when you're validating that block, if you make a mistake, you're just going to be out of the money. And I don't buy this like catch on fire argument, but there is something to say about making sure that the miners are continuously running, because you do need them to do something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be maximizing the utility of your miner. And that part I get. As far as sort of slowing it down, I never really bought that argument. It's more because everybody's greedy and they want to make more money, and that's kind of true. I do agree with Roger though that having an empty block does secure the network more, because it hardens every transaction before and hardens every block before. So that part I buy. I don't buy some of this other stuff. So that's my.
But is it worth it? Is it worth it? I mean, I like the security that's added by an empty block. Is it worth having the empty block, or would the entire world be would it be more beneficial for that same block to be mined, I don't know, like you said, 20 seconds later and be completely full?
Well, there's no guarantee that you would find it in 20 seconds. So, I mean, so the empty blocks, so you have to understand that like every hash has an equal probability of being the proof of work. It's a very, very tiny percentage, but any hash on anything has an equal probability. So whether or not you find that empty block, those 10 seconds when you haven't sort of validated the previous block, you pretty much are forced to mine an empty block. Even if you,
well, are you? Oh, yeah. I don't understand the minor technical details, but are you forced to show that block to the world, or you can just wait a little bit until you know what transactions you can put into it?
Yeah, so you could wait a little bit, but then you're not getting the maximum out of your miners, right? And if you don't do it, that's just hash power that's lost on the network. If you mine that empty block, it does add security, and the next block will have a lot more transactions, presumably. But that's the idea. It's you don't lose anything by having a lot of these mining empty blocks. I mean, it sucks because you wanted transactions to go in, but that's just the way it is.
Okay, then let's see who can explain this one to me, right? Mm-hmm. This was the tweet that Cointelegraph put in their article that I tweeted out.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't 15 seconds. It was 1.5 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
Does it take more than 1.5 minutes to validate a block for other miners?
Well, I mean, that's just the timestamp that's on it, or maybe when they received it. It's really hard to tell on the network when they actually found it, because that's going to depend entirely on their stuff. But the fact that these are they're both AMP pool makes sense, because the miner, it takes like 10 to 15 seconds to get the block template and include transactions and do all this other stuff. So I mean, it's possible that they're incrementing the timestamp and like trying to sort of maximize the use of the miner. So I mean, you can't really reliably depend on the timestamp that comes from the block header.
All right, fine. Then let's not depend on the timestamp. Here is BTC China that apparently used a header from an unknown miner to mine their empty block.
Yes, yes, that's entirely reasonable as well, because they start.
Your entirely reasonable is subjective, but go on.
Yeah, so they get the header and they want their mining equipment not to mine on the last block and compete with this one and you know, potentially get their block orphaned. Instead, they're spy mining, just sort of assuming that the block is valid, validating it. And it takes about 10-15 seconds depending on like when they received it and how they construct their blocks or whatever. So during that time, they're just mining an empty block, and that's what they did.
All right. So let me again. I think we've already talked about this from multiple angles. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, but yeah, Bitfury doesn't seem to have this kind of problem. They've never mined an empty block, and they're openly saying. So what the hell do they do? Right? They just wait.
I think they don't spy mine, and they give up like the 10 to 15 seconds is what I think.
Right. And here's what everyone on that big block side, the big blockers, this is the argument they always try to avoid. The bigger the block, the longer that time difference will be to validate that block. Right now, Jimmy's best estimate is 15 seconds. Probably a little worse if the block is coming out of China or coming into China, right? Because of their firewall and I guess internet speeds. And a lot of these miners, though, for some reason, seem to be in like, oh, well, I know the reason, right? You want to put your mining farm somewhere up in the mountains where it's freaking cold. You're not exactly going to put it in Africa unless you have, you know, solar energy coming in feeding it. But the point is, a bigger block will lengthen that time, creating more and more orphan blocks. This is what Richard was trying to explain, but I'm not sure he did a great job pointing out the details as to why bigger blocks would create more empty blocks.
Yeah, and that's kind of true, but let's be fair here. Segwit is also a block size increase. So when you get a block that's a Segwit block, it's also going to be bigger, and you have to validate the whole thing. You can't just like, unless you're a non-upgraded node, in which case you don't have to, you'll get something 1 megabyte or less. If you're an upgraded node, which most of these are supposedly because they have Segwit transactions that they're validating and stuff, then you're going to have that part. And yeah, I mean, 2 megabytes I think is reasonable. It's probably going to take a little longer than 15 seconds to do it. But you know, like it goes both ways. I think 8 megabytes, you start getting some, you know, that gets a little bit harder, especially if you don't have quadratic hashing, you know, solved and things like that. So, you know, a lot of these arguments kind of cut both ways, which is, you know, why it's all interesting.
All right, we're just going to do a quick check of the price and then get back to the debate. It's at 44.12. It looked like it went up as high as 44.69 or so, and it dropped as low as 44.05. So we're still monitoring the price. And now back to the debate.
Probably not Bcash.
Are you serious? I thought everyone else loved Bcash.
Only on the censored forum where there was a actual campaign.
Like the Dalniks, the head dev, like chose Bcash as his name and pushed it. You got to get that guy in line. I'll choose whatever name you like. What the?
Yeah, Bitcoin Cash. That's fine.
Bitcoin Cash. Okay. So Bitcoin Cash does these things, which you say are awesome. The blocks are empty, and when I say empty, I mean they're under a little bit. Go ahead. Okay. Well, I don't want to. Like,
well, you can feel free to talk about Bitcoin Cash, but I'd like to give my own opinion and thoughts about Bitcoin Cash.
I retract my statement regarding Roger's likeness or not of that thing. Bitcoin Cash is a hard fork of Bitcoin, which has really low fees because it has really empty blocks. The last blocks before this call were under 100 kilobytes each. And this is with an 8 megabyte limit. And this is with blocks that are being found 5 to 6 times faster than they should be, just giving free money to the miners. So if Roger's right and transaction fees are the important thing, then you can use almost any other cryptocurrency in the planet because not that many people seem to be like attacking them. So they all seem to work pretty good.
If I can jump in here.
Sure.
I think transaction fees are important, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is the network effect. and the amount of merchants and users and wallets and all this infrastructure built up around the world. And that's why the US dollar will be so incredibly hard to displace, because there's all these banks and mobile apps and just cash registers and vending machines, and just an absolutely staggering amount of infrastructure is already developed around the entire world to use the US dollar. When it comes to cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin has the most amount of infrastructure already in place around the world for people to use it. That's an incredibly hard thing to overcome. Bitcoin Cash has been around for about 3 weeks. Bitcoin Cash changed the underlying economic code of Bitcoin with their emergency difficulty adjustment thing that I definitely have some concerns about myself. I don't think it's the fees that's the most important thing. I think it's the network effect. So go ahead.
So hash rate matters, right? Because that's the reason we don't have 51% tax.
Hash rate's what secures the network, yeah.
All right. Well, the Bitcoin Cash fork, I'm going to say stole something like 2 of 7 to 3 of 7 exahash.
Can you define what you mean by steal in this case?
Well, in this case, they pretended to give a lot of people a thing, which when they went to dump it on market, they couldn't because they had to wait 20 confirmations, 16 to 20, unless you're on Hitbit, and you could do it in 2, which they accepted a huge risk because the chain could have got rolled back. So they dumped this on a bunch of people, which also, for some people in certain jurisdictions, are going to cause tax consequences. And then if you weren't plugged into the internet at the time, you didn't know you were given this thing. And now you're being forced to make a decision as to whether to hold, and by holding, increase the economic value, and by increasing the economic value, pay the miners to screw over the network that you signed up for. So when everyone got
go ahead.
When everyone got these free coins and couldn't dump them on exchange and couldn't drive the price to 0, it gave existing SHA-256 Bitcoin miners an economic incentive to leave and thereby attack the network that they were originally participating in, which was the real Bitcoin. So all the people that didn't dump on site the Trojan horse coins allowed the market value to float, gave the miners an incentive to switch, slowed down block times in Bitcoin, reduced security in Bitcoin. And this was done with a Wix website, a single developer, and some miners that were interested in profit. That's gross. That's bad. If a single developer with a Wix website and a single dev can steal half of Bitcoin mining power, well, it's just another centralized point of failure. The Wix admin can go in there and change the download link for the wallet and steal everyone's keys, which, by the way,
just about any website hosting.
Yeah, but
DNS could point to some other website that's a clone with malware for download. I don't think that's a problem. That's just a problem with the internet, period.
No, it's not, because the more people you share the ability to write with, then you multiply your risk. So if you host with the same people that host your DNS, then there's 1 point of failure. If you host somewhere different than you host your DNS, now there's 2 points of failure. If you use 2FA through SMS, now you've got SS7, 3 points of failure. If you don't do the administration yourself and you hire an admin, now you get 4 points of failure, and they just keep multiplying.
So I think the fact that they use a Wix website is probably the weakest criticism of Bitcoin Cash.
I don't think you're going to find a lot of enterprise-level, multi-billion-dollar projects launched on Wix websites. I think it is a huge security problem that speaks to the inability of their developers. There's a reason they only have 1 developer. There's a reason their software is not working properly right now. There's a reason that it's hard for you to hire good devs.
There's not 1 developer. That's just an outright lie. There's quite a few developers. There's a huge ecosystem developing around it. I look at it. It's only been out for about 3 weeks, and it has the 3rd or 4th biggest market cap in the world at this point. The fact that the blocks are happening, already 100 kilobytes, and they're happening a lot more often than once every 10 minutes. That shows that a lot is already happening on it.
Hold on a second. I said that you liked Bitcoin Cash, and then you told me not to put words in your mouth. But now you're promoting the heck out of it. So
I'm saying stuff's happening on Bitcoin Cash. So a lot of people think that I'm the one that pumped up the price of Bitcoin Cash. So I didn't sell a single Bitcoin. No, you didn't, but a lot of other people have.
No, I didn't. I promoted that idea too. Because why wouldn't you?
I haven't. So
you don't have to sell Bitcoin. You could have sold your other altcoins to pump it. You could have sold
sold a single Bitcoin or altcoin or Cash or anything for Bitcoin Cash up until yesterday, and I sold like about a dozen Bitcoins for some Bitcoin Cash because I had them sitting in exchange. I wasn't quite sure what to do with them at the moment, so it definitely wasn't for me.
Well, I like that. I'm happy to see that wasn't you, because I don't like the concept that someone comes along, steals brand awareness, steals literally.
So I'd like to disagree with the word steal here. So let's talk about it with hash rate. The hash rate belongs to the miners and the owners of that mining equipment, and they're free to do whatever they want with it. They can mine on Bitcoin Legacy. They can mine on Bitcoin Cash. They can, just turn it on to heat their apartment and not mine anything if they want to. That hash rate belongs to them. And if they decide to mine on Bitcoin Cash with it, nobody's stolen anything from anyone at all. So I would like.
I don't really want to use the word steal, but I'm literally just short of words.
Incentivize maybe isn't more accurate. Okay. Bitcoin Cash is incentivize miners to switch from Bitcoin Segwit to Bitcoin Cash.
Ah, there he is. He said it. He said coin Segwit. I love that. It was like when you say that the child's been stolen and you say child Jones has been abducted from this area. Trying to cancel my screen share here. All right, so just a quick recap of what we heard there. We started out, we were talking about how hash rate secures the network. Roger saying there's a network effect of merchants and wallets. BCH stole the hash. They took the network.
Yeah, there was a lot going. There was a lot going on there in their statements. So there'll be a lot for us to dissect now.
Yeah, I was gonna sneeze, but then I didn't sneeze. So let's see. BCH stole the hash, according to Richard. They chose to leave the network, attack Bitcoin. BCH was made on a Wix website. They discussed the site insecurity about admins having access. We'll go into that a little bit more. They said there was one developer on Bcash. Roger disagreed, said quite a few. Ecosystem, market cap, 100 kilobyte block. Stuff is happening on Bcash. Finally, they went over the important issue of will Roger pump. Now, previously on my show on Scaling Bitcoin on the Mad Bitcoins channel, Roger did say that he would sell his Bitcoin for the alternative. I'm not sure if we were talking Bcash at the time. We might have been talking 2x or larger blocks, but he was for it then. He's saying he's not for it now. He casually says that he dumped 12 Bitcoins, a lot of money for us normal people, but for Roger, that's change. He dumped that into Bcash. I don't know why. He didn't say that he had to buy something with Bcash or there was a website that he was going to go buy things with. There's no merchant websites for Bcash yet. And then finally, we went back over the steal versus own argument. So let's just weigh in there. Tone, go ahead and start us off.
All right, so I'm going to start off with this was something that was pointed out to me on Twitter, specific about this part of the video that I'm watching for the first time. And Roger says that he has not sold any Bitcoin for Bitcoin Cash. And here is Roger on Reddit 16 days ago admitting that he's dumped hundreds of Bitcoins for Bitcoin Cash. So either he was lying then or he's lying now. But this isn't something you can say that, oh, I made a mistake. I mean, we all say inaccurate things sometimes, but this is a straight up fact check. And here is one more. Again, this is also Roger's Twitter account. It says, I bought thousands of BCC, which is Bitcoin Bcash, with my Bitcoin so far. How about you? And that's 15 days ago.
That does seem radically different from what he just said. And hundreds would mean he sold hundreds of Bitcoin, which is an incredible amount of money.
Right. And I know Jimmy probably wants to comment as well, but I will quickly say that. So both of them, again, I don't like this argument. So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit for Bitcoin Cash. So Richard's point that, well, no one is using Bcash for transactions, it's totally useless. I don't like that point of criticism because Bcash just got here and their stupid mining difficulty level is allowing them to mine this thing at like 1 block every minute or two. So and there isn't economic activity and there are no ATMs. I mean, this is what Roger said. Your coin needs to have commerce built around it. And obviously, Bcash has no commerce built around it, which is more of a reason why you don't hard fork. But that's a different topic. But I think making the argument that, well, no one uses Bcash, that's the same argument that people said, well, no one uses Bitcoin back in 2010. And the answer is, well, correct, because there is no infrastructure to use it. So I think me playing devil's advocate for Bcash, I think it's a very weak argument telling people that that Bcash is useless, because it is useless because there is no infrastructure. So I really don't like that argument. On the flip side, Roger's argument of how great it is because it's being mined so quickly is just completely dumb. That goes on that front. And I would have never made the argument that everything is coming from a Wix template website, but Richard does have me convinced that that is a huge problem. And it's not the fact that that's a huge problem. It's a fact that technical people need to know that it's a huge problem. Like, I shouldn't have to know that, but technical people do. So someone like Richard should not be the one to point out to someone that is running Bitcoin.com how a secure website, what is or isn't a secure website, right? Because I'm not a website admin, but if your biggest brand is a website, you should have a full understanding of what is and isn't security on that website. So that point I found very, very important. Roger blows it off. Richard hypes it up, and I think Richard is totally right about it, even though I have zero technical expertise in that matter.
And now Roger has been saying over and over again that the way that they built Bitcoin was the right way to do it, that they had merchants and they had adoption and people were using it. So we can only say, is this the way they built Bcash? Are there any merchants? Is there any adoption? Is anyone using it? If not, we have to say, why has the price gone up so fast in this last week? And we have to say it's not because of merchants and transactions and hard work. It seems more like hype, and it's questionable that Roger can't tell the difference and that his own argument's kind of being thrown back on him there. To go over the Wix website issue, the more people that have access to your website, the worse it is. A lot of companies now will give you kind of a virtual machine. You can set up your website in there. Your website there is a lot safer than if someone just has access to your interface with something like Wix. I don't know how many administrators there are for Wix. I don't know if you have people that go through spam comments or what, but all of those people would presumably have access to your interface. If all it took was to change the download link from the official version of the wallet to your version of the wallet that steals all the coins, there's a potential gain of a lot of money there. There's a reason for someone to give up their job at Wix to steal your Bcash, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars of it. It's a little unsafe. It's not good on the details. It's not technical. It's not a strong choice. It's not that hard to set up a better website solution. It shows that the Bcash team perhaps was in a rush. Maybe they don't have experience with websites. I don't know why they wouldn't hire someone that does. It's questionable, I think, is what Richard's saying. It's not going to sink the ship, but it just doesn't look that great.
Yeah, this was also a huge point of criticisms by Peter Todd for Ripple. He felt that their website was grossly insecure for what they were doing.
And Jimmy, any comments on this last section?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I wanted to agree with Roger that the network effect is definitely what makes Bitcoin stronger than any altcoin. I think he has maybe a slightly different take on what infrastructure really means, though. I personally think that the infrastructure that matters is sort of the thing that secures your coin, sort of more the store of value infrastructure plays than necessarily the medium of exchange infrastructure plays. I think Richard pointed out earlier in this debate how there's a lot of merchants that have stopped taking Bitcoin, and that doesn't seem to affect the price one way or the other. I remember in 2014, there were a lot of stories of different merchants taking them. They didn't move the price at all. I don't think anyone really cares. If you want to use your Bitcoin to buy something, you can easily just cash out and use the cash and get all sorts of protections using credit cards or whatever. So I think I agree with him. I just don't think we agree on maybe what infrastructure really matters. And he expressed some skepticism about the emergency difficulty adjustment, and I think I agree with him on that as well. As far as the Wix website, I mean, the way you're supposed to do secure downloads is to have a few key signers, right? You have a PGP key, and you publish it to every PGP key, website that MIT is a popular one, GPG. There's a bunch of places where you can sort of publish your public key, and then you sign the binary with your private key so that people know that it came from you. And that's how you're supposed to do it. Doesn't matter if it's on a Wix website or if it's on it could be on Tor. It doesn't matter, right? As long as it's signed and you have a signature, and people know that you're the developer and that it's not a stolen key. That's how you're supposed to secure it. I don't know whether their Bitcoin Cash developers are doing that. I was actually just trying to find out whether Bitcoin Cash had where you download Bitcoin Cash and figure out whether or not they PGP signed it. But that's the more important thing, not the necessarily Wix website, blah, blah, blah. It could be on the most secure website in the world. It doesn't matter. If anyone can go and switch out the binary, then you're in trouble. But if you have a PGP signed message saying this is the actual binary and you can SHA-256 the binary and get this thing, and I approve this SHA-256 signature. That's how you're supposed to validate it, and that's how Bitcoin does it. That's how a lot of wallets do it, and that's best practices.
Yeah, no, and I'm also seeing some absurd comments in the chat I want to address. They're saying there's no infrastructure on Bitcoin. Now, the word infrastructure means the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities, e.g. buildings, roads, power, supplies needed for the operation of a society or an enterprise. So I would say you can buy Bitcoin at Coinbase. You can sell it at GDAX. This is infrastructure. Bcash doesn't have this. You can buy gift cards at local Bitcoins or other websites with Bitcoin. ATMs in the real world. You can buy actual Bitcoin wallets. On your phone, you can install multiple Bitcoin wallets from the App Store. And yes, while the segregated witness wasn't it wasn't ready at the very exact day that it rolled over, that doesn't mean that there's not infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure for Bitcoin. I would say for Bcash, it's more like Litecoin or Dash, where they have some infrastructure, but Bcash is so new, they really have none. So it's not a fair argument to say that the infrastructure is equal. It's absurd, and you look silly.
Right, and I just want to very quickly point out that I mean, these are just my old articles that I just compiled on my website that I've written, and I made the argument back in 2014 that the more merchants accept Bitcoin, the more pressure would put on the price, basically saying that all of these merchants in Japan that Roger is so proud of, none of them are holding the Bitcoin. They're all immediately selling it on the open market and market orders. And back in 2014, I made the argument because people were saying PayPal should integrate Bitcoin, and I was saying it'll be a complete disaster, because now those that have a lot of Bitcoin will just spend them and there'll be no demand on the back end, because PayPal will immediately just convert everything to cash, to USD, to any other currency. So having a lot of merchants come on the market is not necessarily a great thing. It just needs to be done organically. I always consider merchants adopting Bitcoin as the supply side of the equation, not the demand side of the equation, unless the employees are accepting Bitcoin as salary or their suppliers are accepting Bitcoin as payment. If the merchant is immediately selling all that Bitcoin, that's the supply on the, and a drawdown on the price.
I just saw someone in the chat, they're like, you don't need to trust the developers if the code is right. No, you always need to be able to trust the developers. You have no idea what's hidden underneath the code that's under the code that you actually see. The trustworthiness is very important in this industry. And if you have 100 developers on Bitcoin and 1 developer on Bcash, I trust the 99 other people to check that one guy's code rather than that one guy all by himself.
Right. Oh, speaking of that, sorry, I know we want to get back to the video, but this was like the biggest argument that I had versus Roger Ver, and that people really, really were critical on when I was saying that this was the argument versus Bitcoin Unlimited at the time, where I was saying Bitcoin Unlimited had like 2 or 3 developers without all that much blockchain developing experience, versus the 100 or so developers on Bitcoin Core, some of whom have Bitcoin Talk accounts that have been around longer than Roger Ver himself. And I got so much criticism saying, well, how do you know? Why do you think a big team is better than a small team? I know so many small teams that are better than big teams. This is the same argument that's like saying, well, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college, and Bill Gates dropped out of college, and Steve Jobs dropped out of college. So if I drop out of college, I can be like them. I think this is a ridiculous argument. And I hate it when people make it like, well, how do you know the bigger team is better than the smaller team? I'm like, no, it's all about the quality of the people. And that big team didn't just come together out of nowhere. That big team grew organically based on their expertise that the small team doesn't even have. So I really hate, these arguments that, dropping out of college will make you a billionaire. This is kind of that argument.
Yeah, correlation is not causation. Yeah.
It's a very dangerous argument. There's nothing wrong with college. It's great fun. All right, let's get back to the debate here. We're rolling along. We're at minute 51. We've got still half an hour, maybe 40 minutes to go.
So let's talk about the end result of this occurring. How would you feel if someone came up to your Bitcoin.com company and said, you know what, we're going to destroy your company because we don't think you're running it right. I know that you've been here for many, many years, paid dearly to put this up and build the things you have, but we think you're stupid and we're going to destroy your company. But you know what? It's not theft. It's not bad. It's not evil. It's just the free market because we're going to give you some shares in our new company.
So you're describing exactly what Blockstream has done to Bitcoin. You're describing exactly what Blockstream has done to Bitcoin. We had the Bitcoin white paper from day one that described exactly what what Bitcoin was. It's a chain of digital signatures. And Satoshi said very clearly that the Bitcoin never hits a scaling ceiling. The ultimate solution is to let the blocks get as big as they need to be. And then Blockstream came in and they said, screw that. That's stupid. Bitcoin doesn't need to be a chain of signatures. The block should be 1 megabyte and have completely changed the roadmap. So you can make an argument that the thing that you were complaining that Bitcoin Cash is doing is exactly what Blockstream has done to Bitcoin. They've completely turned Bitcoin upside down from what was outlined in the original white paper described by Satoshi.
So your argument is Blockstream sucks, and because Bcash, Bitcoin Cash did the same thing, they also suck.
No, I think my argument is that anybody can advocate for whatever they want, and they shouldn't use force or fraud to do it. And so, Blockstream has been very successful in what they've done. Credit to them.
See, you say that, right? You believe that people shouldn't use force, but I think you use force. So when you post,
the force to me, please.
I will. So when you post on our Bitcoin, they don't want to hear anything about altcoins, and they consider certain changes to the consensus algorithm of Bitcoin altcoins. And that may be
they. Who is they? The moderators.
The moderators, yeah.
Because the users don't get to decide. Their posts get deleted when they start posting things about altcoins. The posts get deleted. If the users weren't interested in discussing those altcoins or those other things, they wouldn't be posting on there to begin with. So
I agree.
We have from on high a bunch of people deciding what is allowed to be discussed and what's not.
Yes.
And you can post anything you want that's negative about Bitcoin Cash, and those posts are allowed to stay. But if you post anything that's positive about Bitcoin Cash, those posts will be deleted. So
I agree. So
that's a fair moderation policy.
You know what? You might be right. What I want to point out to you is that you are becoming the evil that you hate. You just don't realize it. So you're a moderator on RBTC. You're a moderator on RBTC, right? Have you ever read the website? Have you ever moderated it? Did you go there?
Unlike our Bitcoin, our mod logs are completely open, and you can see every single moderation that I've ever done on our BTC.
Right.
And it's probably less than a dozen actual actions, and I think probably 10 of the dozen were just me approving posts that had been deleted by the auto moderator of Reddit itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not actively moderating.
My point is that your end result of horrible ecosystem is the same, but the mechanism is different. The reason that the ecosystem sucks,
ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm going to do all this stuff. I know I'm being mean, so I'm going to say exactly why I believe what I believe. Our Bitcoin is considered overly censored because of the reasons that you've described, and I'm willing to grant you those things. I don't like our Bitcoin, and I don't like it because of the over moderation. I don't like it because most of the participants suck. I don't enjoy engaging in conversation with the majority of people that I find there. I find Twitter to be a much more interesting, much more intelligent conversation, full of people that actually run businesses, actually hold
a lot less
Bitcoin.
censorship going on.
Right, a lot less censorship, a lot more good things going on, a lot more positivity. I like Twitter a lot better than I like our Bitcoin. And I like our Bitcoin a lot more than I like our BTC. Because your guys' problem isn't a moderation problem. It's a tragedy.
What free speech problem?
I've done this a couple days now. You guys are 25% pro Bitcoin Cash for a subreddit called BTC. So you're mistitled the subreddit now. You need to change the name to be accurate. You falsely advertise on Reddit, and I click these links that are clickbaity links, and they don't take me to the article that's advertised. They just drop me in the main subreddit thread. And you have pseudonymous effective moderation through the fanboys that downvote things so far down that no one ever needs to moderate them out of vision because the fanboys do it for you. So
maybe that's the general opinion of people that are participating there.
Yeah, but you can grow a garden of weeds, and then you can say, you know what, we never have to protect our roses here because we don't have any. It's all weeds. And that's what RBTC is. I dare you today to go to RBTC and screenshot it and just categorize each post. Something like 7% is anti-Bitcoin core, 25% is Bitcoin Cash, 10% is BCC, another 6% is BCH. And there's nothing about Bitcoin on the RBTC forum. There's nothing about, hey, this person adopts this. There's nothing about, hey, how can I program this wallet? There's not a single good thing to be found in that place. Maybe because everyone that's been censored has moved there, and you guys don't have to force it to be evil through moderation. It's just emergently evil. But I'm telling you, it's bad.
So if you don't enjoy the conversation that's going on RBTC, then don't participate. It's that simple. Nobody's being forced to participate in that one. And I'm not very sympathetic to the criticism that allowing too much free speech is a bad thing.
But it's not free. There's a downvote button. And you just have the emergent. You have
the votes don't disappear. The votes are still there.
if you know the percentage of people that hit page down on a website, you lose something like 50% plus every time you have to hit page down.
So I don't know about other people, but for myself personally, I love reading the posts that get the most, that have been collapsed because of the downloads. Usually those are the ones that I always click to uncollapse it, and I think, oh wow, this person really did deserve to download a lot of times.
My mission isn't to like trash talk you. I actually have solutions to offer. If you believe censorship is bad because it starves people of the ability to make good decisions because they're starved of data, then it is important to, one, not moderate incorrectly, which apparently you already have covered. Congratulations, I like that. But two, you have to account for fanboyism and extremism and mob mentality. And you have to maintain the quality of your ecosystem by promoting things that are alternative points of view that kind of were anti the reason you started the whole thing in the beginning. Because for people to make good decisions, they need to see both sides. And on our Bitcoin, they don't see the big blocker side. And on our BTC, all they see is censorship, anti-core, and BCH. That's it. And that's not healthy.
I think those are incredibly important topics to the Bitcoin. So we have a group of people that have come into Bitcoin that have engaged in this giant censorship campaign to promote censorship-resistant currency. And I simply don't trust anybody that engages in censorship to maintain Bitcoin as a censorship-resistant network. And I think you and I both view decentralization as the tool to achieve censorship resistance. And with Bitcoin, the end goal is censorship resistance, and the decentralization is simply the tool to achieve that goal. And if this guy Famos is going around on this big giant censorship campaign to promote what's supposed to be censorship-resistant currency, I don't trust that guy as far as I can throw him. If he's willing to engage in censorship, he's not going to protect Bitcoin's censorship resistance.
The small amount of defense that I will give him is that if you want to read about altcoins, oh boy, you can read about all the altcoins you want on the Bitcoin Talk forum. So he didn't perform the censorship there, but he does perform on our Bitcoin.
Even their own subsection on our Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, on BitcoinTalk.org. It's been a while since I visited, but I believe there's a subboard devoted.
Every single ICO launch goes there first. Every altcoin launch goes there first. So they're not performing that censorship across that whole domain. They are performing it across our Bitcoin. But you know what? If you're tired of seeing people get scammed and you're tired of people seeing lose millions of dollars in altcoins, they're too stupid to understand large arguments. If someone goes to our Bitcoin, they really should not be reading about alts. And I don't see a lot of Ethereum posts on your subreddit. So you do perform moderation there.
No, our mod logs are open. You can see anybody can post a post about Ethereum. If people want to upload it and talk about it, it'll stay there. And
I'm sorry for this. I thought that, like every other forum, you guys would try and restrict it to the title of the forum and the rules. Most forums.
And as Richard's about to say, they are definitely going to start testing that on our BTC. I'm sure people are trying to post about Ethereum as we speak right now, totally unrelated to this comment. So we had a lot there. I'm going to rewind, try to recap what we saw. Okay, so first they went over the idea of why Satoshi left.
Hey guys, I literally have a chopper outside my window, so unless you guys want to see it, I can move my camera over there, and you clearly should be able to hear it at this point.
We heard it just a second.
We do hear it. Maybe for a little bit of mute. Maybe mute for a little bit. Thank you.
All right, so we'll catch that chopper later. But we talked about why did Satoshi leave, and Roger kind of tried to insinuate that it was because of Blockstream. We're going to go over the history of that in just a second. They talked about our Bitcoin versus Twitter. Richard saying there's a smarter discussion on Twitter. I also find that the short character limit of Twitter helps as well. 180 characters. You have to get right to your point. They talked about our BTC. Richard said that it's pro Bcash, that they advertise. They talked about the differences between top-down moderation, moderation with a goal, and bottom-up moderation, moderation by the fans themselves, that they can actually moderate the system so they talked about people don't push page down. If you get knocked down the page, it's as good as your comment not being there. At disagreement, Roger apparently always reads the claps posts, which maybe, Roger, you shouldn't do. Maybe it's bringing you down, man. Maybe you need to avoid those negative comments. Censorship's bad. They don't want to mod incorrectly. Decentralization, censorship resistance. And there's altcoins on Bitcoin Talk, so it can't be that bad. Maybe our Bitcoin censorship, or what you want to call censorship or moderation, was because they're tired of losses and they want to protect the noobs from losses. So where do you want to start there, Jimmy? I want to say, first of all, the reason Satoshi left at the time, Gavin Andreessen was the lead developer for Bitcoin. He scheduled a meeting. I want to say it was with the Council on Foreign Relations, but it might have been the CIA.
It was CIA.
Okay, so CIA first and CFR after that. But either way, he started meeting with some very creepy people, and it's not like Satoshi really said anything. He was just kind of like, I'm out. So there's like some government potential influence there. And again, it was Gavin who signed the 2X agreement, and Gavin who might even be in support of Bcash. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But yeah, it was because of disagreements with Gavin and just because the project was getting really big. So where do you want to kick off, Jimmy? Go ahead.
Well, so I have a few things. I actually agree somewhat with Roger. I do want to correct him on one thing. Segwit is a block size increase. I don't think people get this. Segwit is a block size increase. He's arguing for bigger blocks. He's like saying Satoshi meant for it to be a bigger block, whatever. Got that in Segwit. I don't think he really quite gets it, or like this sort of like a misperception that keeps happening is that, you know, I mean, we saw it earlier today. You know, you look at you know, xpt.eu or whatever, and there are blocks that are over a megabyte because they're including Segwit transactions. It's a block size increase, people. I don't think people get that, and you know, with it comes a lot of the things that a lot of the benefits and the, you know, negatives of having bigger blocks, including, you know, more spy mining, a little bit more centralization, all that stuff. But that's something that I think we really need to clear up here, because Segwit is a block size increase. All right. As far as what Roger was saying, I kind of agree with him. You know, our Bitcoin has a stricter moderation policy that's probably a lot like censorship. Our BTC lets their users use it. I think I agree with Richard, though. The end result is very similar. You know, you end up suppressing posts. And what I thought Roger got wrong there was that he was arguing, well, we like decentralization, blah, blah, blah. Decentralization is, by definition, a very centralized thing, right? A bunch of mods that are like saying okay or not. I don't think Reddit is really the right forum for that sort of thing. And if you're trying to build a decentralized forum, Reddit is not the place to do it, because they are the definition of centralization. They can shut your you know, subreddit down at any point. They have with a lot of different subreddits. So I don't understand where he's going with this decentralization argument with respect to that. But that said, you know, he created it. I think that's great that he did. Whether or not you think it's something that you want to read is entirely up to you, and let the market decide. If they like it, then they'll go there. Same thing with our Bitcoin. If you like it, you go there. I personally don't really read either one right now. I think I get most of my news on Twitter, just like Richard. But you know, you're free to go and participate if you want. If you don't want, you can leave, and that's part of the free market at work. And I don't really see it being a big deal. If it's censored in one place, then go somewhere else. I personally find Medium to be a really good place for discourse, because you do have a longer than 140 character space to like go and write something and you know clarify whatever it is you're thinking. You don't necessarily get to do that on Twitter, but you know, Twitter is pretty good too. You know, you get a lot of different perspectives, and you don't like downvote something. You just sort of like it if you like it. And you know, there's like you can follow and get a lot of different perspectives. I think you know, I mean, Twitter is still centralized. They can ban your account, and there's a lot of Bitcoiners whose accounts have been banned as well. So I don't know if that's exactly the ideal either, but at least it's better than, you know, Reddit and these forums that are kind of. So I mean, I applaud Roger for creating his forums. I think that's great. I think if that's the community that he wants, then that's the community he's gotten, and that's great. I think more choices is great for everybody. But you know, I don't know if you have a leg to stand on if you're complaining about what someone else is doing, because that's not owned by you. Something that was communally owned, then maybe, but it's not. So kind of owns BitcoinTalk.org. And that's not where I go for a lot of stuff. I mean, I'll maybe go there to sell a coin or two, but I don't really get this argument about like whether you know, the censorship stuff. I think what Roger's done is something that's good for Bitcoin, and that, you know, he's made more. I don't get this argument about censorship.
Also, I want to second your opinion that Reddit is highly centralized. It is owned, I think, still by Condé Nast, the publisher that owns companies like Wired Magazine. It's single website. And there's a difference when you talk about censorship resistance in money, which is the ability to spend money, and censorship resistance in discussion. If you had a completely censorship resistant discussion, much like our chat that's scrolling by, you don't get the highest form of discussion. You don't get people going back and forth. There's a lot of spam. There's a lot of people promoting their own point of view, which is fine for them, but it muddies up the discussion when we're talking about Bitcoin and you keep saying, but Dash has master nodes. And it does, but that's not part of this discussion. The goal of communication is a better discussion. The goal of censorship resistance on something like Bitcoin is the ability to spend money. So I think they're very different, even though we can use the word censorship to describe both of them. Let's go to Tone for more.
All right, guys. Yeah, so looks like the chopper is gone, but which is good. But yeah, here is that block, and when I saw it come through, I looked at it this morning, I'm like, whoa, I actually didn't realize that it would be a block that's greater than 1 megabyte. It was mined by Bitfury on the Bitcoin side of the fork, I guess. But yeah, but it's interesting, like my where I live, apparently right in front of my apartment building is where a lot of the helicopters like to do their trainings. It has to be, because I get them way too often, and they're just flying around in circles. It's either a police chopper or a, what do you call them? What's the people that, you know, get people out of the water? The cold rescue, the, Coast Guard. Thank you, Coast Guard. It's either a Coast Guard chopper or a police chopper or like some black helicopter. I don't think there's any FBI buildings around here, but maybe they have like one little office and one chopper. And it kind of scares me because I'm like, you know, they're doing their little circle like flies, and it has to be practiced because there's nothing around here that they would really need to be doing. And I'm like, you know, one of these days, one of these idiots is going to crash into my fucking building. And I really hope it's not my apartment because I'm on the top floor of my building, and they're literally like buzzing. I can like, if I go on my terrace, I can probably like throw a beer and hit their chopper. That's how close they are. Over when they fly next to residential. So that's kind of crazy. Anyway, let's get back to this. I think we talked about this issue earlier. I think Richard is absolutely right when he says that all Roger did was turn what he didn't like about our Bitcoin into a 10x version of the other side of the argument. And in my opinion, it's a much worse argument to begin with. And all he did was give an argument with maybe 10% support, like 10 times the amount of, you know, voice. And Roger doesn't seem to understand Richard's point of view that if Roger really wanted to make a difference and Roger really wanted to show our Bitcoin how to do it right, he would have had equal amounts of, print time on his RBTC forum for both sides of the argument. Instead, RBTC is a double down version of their side of the argument. And Roger, and I didn't like the fact that like Roger doesn't seem to understand that's what Richard was talking about. So that seems kind of, I don't know, like I understand it clearly, but Roger didn't seem to. All right, let's check back in with the debate. I think we're getting pretty close to the end. There's only about half an hour left. We are at 1.25x speed, so.
If you guys haven't been attacked by shills for other currencies yet, maybe this is a bad conversation for us to have had because they're going to go test that now. Every other currency shill.
People can upvote or downvote as they see fit.
All right. So I just want to warn you that at some point you become the evil you're trying to destroy. You own Bitcoin.com. You mod RBTC. You're on television all the time. You're hiring devs to do side deals. You're running your own conferences that have a subsection of people that has done weird things.
So I think if we can stop a little bit, I think you're strawmanning me a little bit. So you can go to the forum.bitcoin.com and you can see that there's posts over there from I forget what his screen name is over there, but he's saying all sorts of nasty, rotten things about me and claiming that I'm, Jihan's little puppet and this and that. And like his posts are allowed to stay. His posts are still there. I don't delete his posts.
I'm not saying you're bad now. I'm saying you're at risk. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, saying that anybody that's the owner of a big popular website is a risk. That I can't.
But a lot of Bitcoin.com. I mean, you're in my.
Bitcoin.com gets millions of unique visitors per week. I could go rogue like Famous has already done and has been a bad actor for years now. And so I hear you complaining that I might do something bad in the future.
Start a foundation like every other large entity did. Just start a foundation and let it be someone else's problem. That's what Wikimedia did with Wikipedia.
Yeah, I donated. I think it was like 8,000 Bitcoins total to the Bitcoin Foundation, and that didn't work out so well.
No, you get to choose the directors, man. Like, you get to choose the first guys. Like, I'm just saying, if you don't like centralization and you feel it's a risk to the ecosystem, and you don't like what Themios has done, and he might have turned out to be, you know, a great guy way back when, and power corrupted him. I'm just telling you to be on the lookout for it, because at some point your bubble's going to get smaller, and you're not going to listen to as many people, and then no one's going to tell you, hey, you know, look what's going on.
So that's fair advice. So I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
I hear quite a bit of hate for altcoins from you, or it seems like you're not a fan of any altcoin ever. Can you so I'll give you my stance, and I'd like to hear why you think I'm wrong. So in life, it's good to have more options. So in the crypto coin ecosystem, people can choose between, you know, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum and Monero and Dash, and take your pick. There's 1,001 altcoins out there. Most people just choose one or two, and Shapeshift.io makes it easy to convert from one to another. But people have the option of choosing the one that's the most useful to them in their daily life. What's wrong with people having the ability to choose which coins they want to use in their daily lives?
So this is the Darwinist argument. Darwinism and survival of the fittest and trying new things and mutation, and, you know, it works awesome when you've got an infinite energy pool and you don't mind all the experiments that went wrong. The problem with finance, economics, and human emotions are that those poor sons of bitches that chose wrong, because no one has enough time to learn about every alt, even me, and I sit around a lot. It means that a lot of people are going to be ground up into the meat grinder for the experiment of, hey, maybe this works a little bit better. And so the libertarian,
what's the option?
It's very simple. The libertarian argument always is, this locally works very good for me. And so I want to take what locally works very good for me, an educated thinking, individual thinker, and now I want to give that same power to the masses of less capable idiots of the world. And they don't realize that you can't take a local maxima and export it to people with different traits and expect the same outcomes. You probably benefit from having a wide selection of currencies to choose from, but you will find that not very many people are like you. And you have to choose between brutal Darwinism, where tons of people lose tons of money, but maybe better investors end up with it, and maybe the world is a little bit better off. This is the boom and bust cycle of artificially low interest rates. This is the boom and bust cycle of credit from nowhere.
Things being related.
Well, how many times do you want to see people lose money to Ethereum? They can't even do they can't even do a multi-sig wallet properly. The pre-mag wallet in the space lost hundreds, at least $60 million from a poorly.
So what are you suggesting though? Should we make altcoins illegal? How would we prevent people from being able to experiment with altcoins? There's either they experiment as they want, or they're not allowed to, or prevented. What are you advocating should be done?
Just like every other developed industry, experts in the space that have a personal reputation to defend, like you, like me, like other people, speak their expert knowledge to influence the masses in directions that they feel benefit those masses and the ecosystem as a whole. It is up to us as thought leaders, people that have individual thoughts, experience, skin in the game, to help the idiots make the right decisions. Because in this bleeding, cutting edge system, a lot more people with these ICOs are going to lose a lot more money than anyone ever thought possible. These things are crazy, and it will not last. And when that pain comes crashing down, you know who else is going to get harmed? The good ecosystem of Bitcoin people that didn't do that pump and dump crap. We're going to pay the price in regulation. We're going to pay the price in bad press, because we didn't do a good enough job helping those people not get robbed. And by the way, the people doing the robbing, they're not even going to end up that well out of it. Some of them will end up in jail. Some of them will end up with more money than they know what to do with. It'll be like winning the lottery for these guys. And if you've ever looked into lottery winners, it never works out well for them.
Squatted funds, sure.
So it's bad for the investors. It's bad for the people taking the money, and it's our job to help shut that shit down. I started coming out publicly when I saw Ethereum's market cap.
Can I ask, when you say shut that down by speaking out against it, or by asking?
Just by speaking.
Wearing costumes to show up.
I left my earpiece in a second. The price we pay for beauty.
Wireless is convenient. Maybe you can't hear me yet, but.
All right, I can hear you.
So I was saying, when you say it should be shut down.
Well, you're advertising for Bitcoin Cash now, and I'm advertising against it. And this is that I am doing what I do.
I guess I didn't make the question clear enough. When you say shut it down, does that mean we should send men with guns and wear costumes?
No, this is more. No, this is more of the, hey guys, you really shouldn't do that, and don't come crying to me when it goes wrong. And when it does go wrong, I'm going to say I told you so. That kind of shit.
I'm on board with that. Yeah.
So I mean, we can have a microcosm of that experience now with Bitcoin Cash if you want, because I hate it a lot. And I can go through all the reasons why I hate it. Then you can tell me if you.
Are there any altcoins that you don't hate? Are there any that are interesting to you?
Oh, sure. You know, Zcash is interesting. There's a fork of it that takes out the founder's reward, which is called Z Classic. That might be interesting. Implementing ZK snarks in Ethereum might be interesting, but the attack surface is too large. I'm pretty sure ZK snarks are going to come in Bitcoin, and I'm glad to hear you support that. That's amazing. Fungibility is super important, as you said. I love onion routing and the Lightning Network. I love drive chains, side chains. You get all the experimenting, all of the changes, all of the craziness, but you tie all the liquidity back to Bitcoin. And there's less attack surface area. I love all that stuff. I think Monero has apparently some use cases, but you know, if it hasn't pumped by now, probably never is going to pump. So I wouldn't be happy to dive right in. You know, I like the non-blockchain technology. Like I like Bytefall a lot better than I like Internet of Things. I'm curious to see whether the distributed acrylic graph can replace these blocks, which do get full and only scale linearly. But
do you have any more tips for me as far as the coins that did airdrops that I can claim with coins? I think it's Byteball. What else do we have?
The Byteball drops once a month. You need to get in soon though, because they don't drop forever. Like they're running out of ones to drop. And then this basically took a snapshot of the Bitcoin economy, and they said, whatever percentage you own of the Bitcoins of the world, we're going to give you the same percentage here, and we're going to do it every month. And then when they're running out distributing them, that's it. So you're going to probably get you know, 1 or 2% free money off the Byteballs. And then the Lumens, I think you get like maybe 0.5% free money. I haven't really looked into it yet, but the deadline's in 2 days, so definitely do it. And there's a new crappy one that came out called like Bitcore, but seems pumpy dumpy, doesn't seem legit. That's not, yeah. So I like the idea that as a Bitcoin holder and owner of the premier currency with the most security, the best devs, the longest track record, the most wallets, the most adoption, you also get the most free money handed to you from these other altcoins that want to leach off the ecosystem for the users.
So I like the thought of having the the longest track record and the best devs and the most security and all of this, but I'm really concerned that we've gone completely off the roadmap that we had for Bitcoin. So
let me tell you the roadmap. The next thing in the roadmap was a hard fork to a larger block. That was the next thing in the roadmap.
Do you think that's going to happen here? What are your thoughts?
I think there's an infinite demand for free storage. And I think that anytime you write something with a blockchain, it gets copied to thousands of computers across the world. By your last measurement, about 5,000 computers. So if I could write,
that accept income connections, and probably around 100,000 that don't.
Okay, so 9,000 that I can write data to, right? So the blockchain is stored on those 9,000 computers. If I write my YouTube channel videos to the blockchain for a low affordable fee, I now have my YouTube videos stored immutably forever across at least 9,000 computers. That's a good bargain for me. I think I'll stop using YouTube. So it is true that the demand for free storage is infinite. And so you have to assign a fee, or you can break the network through denial of service, period.
So the way that the prices are set are based on supply and demand, not somebody sitting in a chair saying we're going to set a fee. So the miners can decide what price they're willing to charge for inclusion in their block space. And right now there's a production quota imposed upon the miners saying they're not allowed to produce more than 1 megabyte of block space every 10 minutes. And that's the exact antithesis of the free market. It's literally a production quota.
Here's the good news. While the Bitcoin core people have been screwing over the idea, which you like and probably could work, of having larger blocks.
It did work. Great track record.
They also were working on stuff that also works and is cheaper and is faster and is a 10,000
and has no track
record
and has no empirical evidence and will also require much bigger blocks for it to work. Lightning Network is a disaster waiting to happen with full blocks.
We'll see. It's
right, because you can't close your channel out. If someone tries to do some monkey business and the block is full and you can't close your Lightning Network out, you're going to lose your money.
Why don't you get CSW and a supercomputer to go model that and produce a report on what happened when he ran the Lightning Network and how it failed, and then we can address it.
Ooh.
Right? There's no reason
to have him on your show next time to speak for himself. So I'm not Craig.
I've trash talked that dude a lot. I'm not sure he's going to want to come on. Craig, if you want to come on and have a chat, I invite you.
All right, so they get a little bit more into the Craig S. Wright Satoshi debate, but let's go ahead and recap what they said, and then I think we've got maybe one more section. They do little closing statements type things. What did they say here? Scrolling back. All right, so we're talking about, is this it? Are we going to go into Darwinism and libertarianism? The idea that people are grinded up in the losses, and that Darwinism has real losses, has incredible devastation. Everything from the Cambrian explosion was wiped out. All the dinosaurs were wiped out. That's when people say this or this, that coin's going to zero. They're talking about the dinosaurs where they're completely wiped out. Libertarians believe that things work for one local smart person, so they should give that same power to everybody. That was a harsh argument of Richard on the libertarians, but he's not entirely wrong. Of course, capitalism is about winners and losers. So, but how do we deal with those losers is how we moderate capitalism. We don't have free capitalism anymore. We have a controlled, moderated version of it. Richard then says that it's going to be bad for Bitcoiners if people lose their money on Ethereum and other projects. He talks about how the hard fork was on the roadmap. There's an infinite demand for free storage. And then we got into a little of Lightning Network versus full blocks at the end. Jimmy, where do you want to start there? Still muted.
There's a lot of stuff there. I mean, I think philosophically, maybe I disagree a bit with Richard. I think people should take personal responsibility. If you make wrong choices and you lose money as a result of not being informed enough or not being smart enough or not like trusting the right people or whatever, that's kind of on you. I don't think we have an obligation to protect investors that are just bad at investing.
And I'm going to disagree and take the other side of that. Basically, right now, the reason the SEC isn't busting down Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these projects is because there aren't any losers. No one's lost their money. No one's complaining to them, writing them every day, filling their mailbags full of complaints. When there are complaints, they will ask. If you look at any recall, like the Toyota brake pedal problem, it started with people complaining. It started with people getting hurt. And that's where they go to a full recall.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some collateral damage to Bitcoin if like Ethereum does bad. I'm honestly not too concerned about that sort of thing.
It won't take much for the media to paint all these nasty cryptocurrencies with the same brush. And what was once just drug money for the Silk Road will soon become how Johnny lost his pension and how Joey died in poverty. And these are real life stories, like Richard's saying. Yeah, it's fine on one thing to say, yeah, evolution's fine, the dodo bird, all these other species, who cares, right? But when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of real people who lose their real money, who then complain about it every day looking for a solution, it's going to have collateral damage.
Yeah, and that's okay, I think. My personal perspective is that if you aren't smart enough, or if you're not brave enough to invest in this thing, or if you think it's only going to go up, then and you lose, I mean, then you lose. I mean, everyone's sort of responsible for their own decisions, and you know, if they want to go and complain about it, I don't think that's right, but you know, that's kind of what they're going to do anyway. I believe that if you're an investor and you invest in the wrong altcoin or whatever, that's kind of on you. If you didn't do the research, if you don't know about it, and you just sort of did it anyway, then that's on you. That's on you. I think I differ a little bit philosophically from both of these guys in that regard a little bit, because they seem to agree on that point. As far as the miner power, I think what Roger said there a little bit was interesting. He was talking about sort of the fee market and how it's a production quota. And his argument was, well, miners should get to decide what goes into the chain because, you know, they can do whatever. I don't think that's quite right, because I don't think the incentives are aligned quite that well, because you can always, if you let them decide what transactions to put in, they may want to bloat the block and then like sort of use that to their advantage. I think you want them to sort of have lesser calculating to do in order to figure out the block. But I mean, that's more of a subtle technical detail. But I mean, he made a good point there. Lightning Network and full blocks, that's yet to be seen, right? Like, and he seems to think that it's improvement, and I think that's a fair point. We don't know how it'll work because it doesn't exist yet, and we'll have to see. But if it does work, sort of as we're saying, then he better walk back on that and say, okay, it's working a lot better than I expected. And
I also found Roger's argument on that disingenuous as well. Roger seemed to think that you would put all of your money or a large amount of money into the Lightning Network. My understanding is you put maybe 40 bucks in, you send $3 around for coffee, and then at some point you have to cash out. I suppose the merchant would have a large amount of money. Perhaps they would need to cash out more regularly, but they could always just hold the Lightning tokens. Roger said if the blocks were full, you couldn't cash out. That seems like a temporary problem. He seemed to think you would lose your money if you couldn't cash out. I don't think that's true. I think he was reaching there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think most people that are going to be on the Lightning Network aren't going to be looking to steal, just like most merchants aren't looking to steal. If you overpay them or something, they'll hand it back as soon as you point it out. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like the whole Lightning Network, like it's unproven, yeah, but like let's see how it works before you say it's not going to. I mean, I think it's kind of the point of like innovation, is that you sort of watch and see where it goes. I am not like entirely convinced it will work yet until I see all the wallets and stuff out there, and I think that's sort of the rational position. But to sort of dismiss it out of hand, I don't think is the right way to view things. So that's sort of my perspective on it.
And let's remind ourselves of a much younger Roger Ver who found something called Bitcoin that no one was using, and it wasn't scaling, and it wasn't popular, and it wasn't ready for prime time. But he still bought that. He still loved that. Why can't he love Lightning Network? He only loves one new thing in his life. There are many new things in this world.
Sure.
Let's go to Tone Vase. You with us, Tone?
Yeah, I am. Hope there's printing something in the background. Hope the noise isn't too bad. So I missed a little bit of that. I had a phone call, but yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I remember. I mean, I personally spoke to Roger about this over a year ago now, and he was saying how Lightning isn't going to work, and like, what developers is he listening to? Well, like, this is the thing, right? Like, you have to name the names. Like, name your developer, and it better not be CSW. It better not be fake Satoshi, right? Like Richard pointed out. So you gotta come with proof if you're gonna claim that, because it's very easy. It may be difficult to prove that something is going to work. It should be much easier to prove that something doesn't work technologically, because all you need is one use case, right? That breaks it. So so that becomes a bit of an issue. The other thing is, I really wish Richard would have driven the point home that Roger is becoming the dominant person in every facet of the industry. And I've talked about this for a long time now on this channel and my channel, saying that he is like the octopus squid that everyone complains about with Goldman Sachs. He does run Bitcoin.com. He is a big investor in the biggest wallet we have, which is blockchain.info. He's getting into mining. He is getting involved with an exchange. Like, he is starting to dominate every facet of Bitcoin. And I think that is a big problem. Not necessarily the fact that it's Roger, just the fact that it's anyone. Barry Silbert is having the same effect, and he gets the same criticism from me.
I agree with that, Tone. It's worth noting that, yeah, go ahead, Jimmy, more on that.
No, I didn't really have that much more. I think we should close out that video, and then hopefully we see some price action. Actually, Tone, do you want to talk about the price action that's happened in the last hour? Because we closed with a red candle.
Yeah, we did close with a red candle, but it looks like my little arrows that I drew during that candle seem to so far be playing out. So far, this looks like a textbook pullback back to the area of the breakout. And now, hopefully, we're trending back up. And sometime next hour, we would be going to new all-time highs.
Wow. Good
All
stuff.
right, and let's get back to the debate. We've only got about 10 minutes left. I think they do closing statements pretty quick. So, you guys.
But it's not going to be pretty. I like Roger. Roger's been a straight shooter for a long time. I've heard bad things, Craig. If you want to come on here and get a mouthful, you're invited. See, it worries me, man, because like that dude talked at your show, and Gavin got convinced he was the Future Bitcoin Conference.
Oh, so that, first of all, that wasn't my show, and I didn't know he was speaking there until I don't know, like the day it happened or the day before. So
I might be dreaming this stuff up, but people run in circles, right? So I would be considered the Blockstream core, small blocker circle, UASF, all that stuff, right? It's not because I've ever ran a node. It's not because I wrote the software. It's just a circle we run in. It's who we chat with, it's who we see, it's who we interact with. From what I've seen, you and John Matonis and Craig Stephen Wright and Gavin Anderson are like a little circle, and I guess Jihan will. Now, I might be wrong, but it seems like I see you guys at a lot of the same events, and I see you saying a lot of the same things, which are big blocks good, and basically big blocks good. I don't really hear you guys say anything else, and censorship bad, I guess.
I guess I'm in pretty good company with John Matonis and Gavin Andreessen and Jihan Wu, and for my interactions with Craig Wright, he seems to be a really, really, really knowledgeable person and a very interesting person. So
he was on TV saying he was Satoshi, and then he provided a fake ECDSA proof that he got busted on, and he's fled from Australia to the UK over some tax stuff. And he's been saying
taxation is theft, so more power to him if that's the case. But my understanding is that
but using the taxation system to re-steal the theft. Like if the government steals from other people and then you steal from the government, you didn't steal that.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you want to read,
I don't know the details of that, and I'm not Craig's spokesperson, so I'll let him speak for himself on those topics. But
you see the risk of the only people out there supporting a person that said he was Satoshi that I've seen are N-chain guys, which I see around you. Anderson, who
in regards to Craig being Satoshi or not, I don't think it matters at the end of the day. Either what he's saying in regards to scaling is accurate and correct and a good path forward, or it's not. And the things that I hear him saying are the same sort of things that the original Satoshi said on his posts on the forum and his emails. And those are the same sort of things that I signed up for when I got involved in Bitcoin. Those are the same sorts of things that led Bitcoin to become an incredible success that it is today. And those are the same sort of things and the same roadmap that I think we should continue to follow down. Which is completely different than
wrote that 1 megabyte limit, right? He did that personally.
Yep, because he was convinced by others that it would be a good idea to prevent spam. And it was intended from day one that it would be removed if the blocks ever even became remotely close to being full at 1 megabyte. So it's never, ever, ever intended to be a permanent limit.
Is it probably worthwhile? So I think the likelihood that you get people to use Bitcoin Cash is larger than the likelihood that you're able to convince all the developers on Bitcoin Core to do nearly anything. So
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So like we could argue whether big blocks are good or not, but we're just going to find out soon because we have both now, right? Yeah. We have both running the same.
Darwinism in action.
Yeah. Okay. So can I tell you why I didn't like the way Bcash went down and the downsides? I'm sorry, Bitcoin Cash.
Sure.
I believe there's a lot of risks people don't see.
Tell me. I mean, I'd love to finish up in maybe the next 15 minutes because it's almost coming up on 3:30 and I haven't had any.
Okay. I'll talk to you whenever you want. I'm a talker.
But please tell me.
So Bitcoin Cash caused people to commingle their funds out of cold storage.
Before we continue, I'd like to point out that too, like Bitcoin Cash caught me by surprise, just like it caught everybody else by surprise. I didn't fund the development. Like lots of things in Bitcoin, I either get credit for or blamed for. Lots of things that I had almost nothing to do with. So I'm along for this Bitcoin Cash ride just like everybody else, but it caught me by surprise, just like everybody else as well. So
I'm glad you cleared that up, man, because I think a lot of people out there thought it was your baby. So I'm glad you cleared that up.
I must either blame you or give me credit for things that I had little or nothing to do with. But
I'll tell you what, if you would respond to your Twitter commenters, you would know what they thought.
I'll tell you what, if you have 100,000 Twitter followers, it's hard to keep up with the infinite scrolling of stuff happening there. So I apologize if anyone feels ignored on Twitter.
Okay. So my summary so far is be careful you don't have too much power. Power corrupts. It's anti-decentralized. Be careful about scammers. Read your Twitter comments if you can. And then you end up with emergent censorship from the bottom, even if it doesn't come from the top. Watch your garden in your subreddit. And now we'll talk about forks. So you might not have supported this fork. You might support a fork in the future. I just want to talk about the risks of forks. A lot of people had a lot of unused coin days and age on their coins, a lot of anonymity, a lot of cold storage that was all harmed and destroyed because they had to go and load their coins into wallets and bring them back to life and now to use them on another network. And they had to download a software that wasn't signed by a person with an identity that could be held to account if keys were stolen. And that fork software. Go ahead.
That's simply not true. So I think you're referring to Electron Cash in regards to that, but there were lots of other wallet options for Bitcoin Cash. There's I don't know, maybe almost a dozen at this point. So BTC.com's wallet supports it. Bitcoin.com's wallet will support it probably by this weekend. We've already submitted it to the Apple App Store, etc. Coinbase is now support. Blockstream's a down support. There was Bitcoin ABC. There was the Bitcoin Cash version of Bitcoin Unlimited. There was the Bitcoin Cash version of Bitcoin Classic. So like there were lots and lots of other options other than Electron Cash. And the way in which Electron Cash worked, in which it would copy the wallet file into its own directory, like, yeah, that's not good, and that probably caught a lot of people by surprise. But don't use software if you don't like it. So
it's even worse. It's even worse than that, right? Because so what? It overwrote your directory, and then you like recover it. That's not a big deal. What's a big deal is that could have been malware. So if someone decides to launch a new, hey Bitcoiners, you get free coins. Download this wallet. You're going to get rich. You're going to see a lot of people lose a lot of money over a new attack vector because no one uses cold storage anymore because they want their airdrops, right? And there's a new attack vector being introduced into this ecosystem from these altcoin airdrop wallets, and not many people know how to use virtual machines. So I had to write a tutorial on, hey, here's a free Windows virtual machine. Here's a free virtual machine software. Now you can run that new thing in its own little sandbox, and whatever evil it tries to do, it's not going to screw up any of your other stuff. You know, I had to write that. The reason I had to write that is because no one else cared. No one else cared enough to do it. I'm not a dev. Why did I have to write it? These are millions and millions and millions of dollars at risk. And I have to write it? That's very stupid. And at a time when that Bitcoin Cash launched, I assure you there was only one wallet because I went to the Wix website and I downloaded the only wallet. And then I checked to make sure that the key matched the the SHA-1 or SHA-2.
The signature, yeah.
Right. And then, you know, even that's not that secure because they could have just put a fake signature up too.
So why are you in such a hurry on this? So like I haven't claimed or moved almost like 90-something% of my Bitcoin Cash. I haven't touched it all. They're sitting there.
Because it's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse. I don't think you should support miners leaving your favorite network. I don't think you should incentivize miners to make your network weaker. I don't think it's fair to count a market cap for a thing that most people have never touched, seen, had access to, or possibly were even told was given to them.
What if at the end of the day, Bitcoin Cash winds up providing more utility to people around the world than the Segwit 1 or 2 megabyte version?
Brand, gotten your own devs, built your own value proposition, used the same airdrop Oracle method that Byteball used. And
okay, hold on. Don't those arguments you just made? Don't those arguments you just made apply exactly to what Blockstream has done? If they wanted to turn Bitcoin into a settlement layer, we'd strip out the signatures for the transactions and make Lightning Network on top of that. Shouldn't they have just started their own coin and their own branding rather than hijacking the Bitcoin project away from what was described in the original white paper?
You can analyze the commits in the software. The vast majority of the commits are Peter Roulé. And so we basically like say Blockstream and we say Bitcoin Core, but we really mean Peter. And he
so should Peter have started his own project?
He did. It's called Bitcoin Core, and most of the nodes in the world run it, and it's been running really, really good. And the only thing that you disagree with him on are the things that some of your technicians said that you should. And let me add, like, it's very simple.
What do you mean by the things that my technicians said that I should? You lost me.
If you go on Wikipedia and you look up big O notation, it's a fancy way of looking at how computers work with big numbers. You take a big number and you give a program this, it takes longer than the lifetime of the universe. If you change the algorithm a little bit, it takes like every time the number gets bigger, the timing gets the same amount of bigger. And you just basically get this ratio of how long does it take to how big is the stuff I'm putting in it. That's the ratio. And blocks scale linearly, right? Visa does 30,000 transactions a second before Christmas. Bitcoin does 3 transactions a second.
So you're advocating for exponential scaling with Bitcoin, right?
I am saying that big blocks could work at the cost of some extra centralization for a little while, but they would never, ever, ever work past a certain point. And then you need that different logarithmic scaling, which Lightning gives and Tier 2 gives. And by the way, Satoshi supported those things. And I can link you to his Bitcoin talk.
And by the way, your Blocks network supports all those things too. And in fact, if we wanted the entire world to use Lightning Network, we would still need to have blocks that are much, 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 much bigger than they are today. So keeping the blocks at 1 megabyte is suicide for the future of Bitcoin.
Pay somebody to model it, just like Gavin Anderson did, and publish it and go, hey guys, look, you are full of crap. This does work. Here's our little AI Bitcoin user. Here's our distributed AWS nodes. And there's a lot of other testing solutions available to you where you can rent proxies and rent computers. You got a whole lot of options available to you to actually test at scale a new Bitcoin network. And then say, look, this stuff works fine. Or if you think Lightning doesn't work and you don't like onion routing, you think it's going to centralize, well, show me, right? Okay. But like, I don't think the Blockstream guys are qualified to say that big blocks couldn't work a little bit now, because they probably could with some risk of centralization, which is a problem. And I don't think you're qualified to say that Lightning can't work. And we have them both now.
So the burden of proof is on them to claim that Lightning can work, whereas we already have 7 or 8 years of empirical evidence that bigger blocks do work.
We shouldn't even argue about this stuff anymore because we have both networks, right? So the best thing I can do is...
I think the argument's almost over. I think you're right about that. And I'm so much happier because now everybody gets to use the version of Bitcoin that they like the most. And the market will decide at the end which one is the most useful version of Bitcoin and which dev team has created the most useful product.
I know we're short on time. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope it's been productive.
We'll have round 2 someday.
Whenever you're ready, I just want to see the value of Bitcoin go up. I want to see more people in the ecosystem using the most secure, most track record thing. If that becomes your thing, I don't want to call it your thing, but if it becomes a big block thing, more power to the world. I'd be more convinced of data.
All right. Well, we have the empirical evidence of the entire history of Bitcoin that as the blocks got bigger, more and more people were using it, and that was the solution. So anyhow, short on time. Thank you. I do look forward to having another edition, second edition, and thank you for sure. I appreciate it.
Good talking, man. Later, bro.
You too. See you next.
All right, we made it to the end. Boy, what a debate, kind of. More similar to the television debates, I feel, than the collegiate debates that I was involved in. But let's go back. What did they talk about? They talked about Electron Cache. They said that it copied a file or overwrote a directory, some kind of problem there. Richard posited that it could be malware. What if a new coin came out, you get free Blanky coin with your Bitcoin, and then you download the Blank coin wallet and it steals all your Bitcoin? That could definitely happen. Richard talked about no one wrote help files to protect the Bcash users. He was forced to do it. A lot of things are like that in this industry. There's not enough attention to detail, and there's not enough marketing or any kind of organization. Richard talked about Bcash being a Trojan horse and that he refused to support miners leaving his network of choice, which is the original Bitcoin network. He said what they should have done was provided their own utility, created their own name, and gone off on their own to create Bcash. Roger countered, saying that that's what Blockstream did. They went back and forth a little about whether Blockstream is turning this into a settlement layer, whether Peter Woolley writes all the code, which again, if I see him again soon, I'll have to congratulate him on writing all the code. They talked about big O notation, and they said Richard had this, I think is very clear, big blocks won't work past a certain point. And I think this is important. Big blocks is a geometrical solution. You 2, 4, 8, 12, you would just keep growing, right? But what we need is an exponential solution. We need one that goes up. We need to think smarter. We need to think outside the box. That's why I think something like Lightning Network's better. It's one thing to say that, yes, processor size, processor speed has been going up lately, but bandwidth is not the same thing. Bandwidth has like physical wires, undersea cables, satellites. These are all fixed and known quantities of bandwidth. We can't just assume bandwidth will keep going up forever, and that's about it. He said you should pay to model it. Jimmy, where do you want to start from there?
Well, so one thing that really troubled me was their support of Craig S. Wright. I always thought Craig S. Wright was completely scammy, no proof, and he keeps claiming things. So. I mean, I do think I do agree with him though that it doesn't matter if he's Satoshi or not. It really should be the idea, but that guy has no credibility in my mind. And anything he says, I don't. I think it's the burden of proof is on him to prove anything. And at least for me, he hasn't proven anything for me.
I agree with that, Jimmy. It was entirely on his decision to say he was Satoshi, and then when he failed to prove it, that was entirely on him. Both of those were actions taken by Craig Wright. We never said he was Satoshi before he said he was Satoshi. His failure to prove it makes him distrustful. If he was a Bitcoin miner and he kept mining bad transactions, do you think they would ban him from the network?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I mean, that said, I mean, I can understand this stance. Like, it's the ideas that matter, and he's just listening to the ideas. But I personally would not take that stance. If you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I thought the discussion went into sort of like protecting people from themselves again. Like most of these arguments oftentimes come down to, hey, we need to make sure that we're protecting users from themselves. And what if noobs think this? And what if people make this mistake? I'm not as concerned about that anymore. And I think that was kind of a waste of time, like talking about what noobs might do. And if you release a fork coin and these people and you lose trust, blah, blah, blah. If you don't actually know that many people that are like that, or if people aren't smart enough to actually do some research before doing these things, I don't really have that much sympathy for those users. You should be, informing yourself and figuring out what your investment is. If you don't look into your investments or care about your investments enough to actually look into them and figure out what to do before you make like $100,000 transaction, well, then that's kind of on you. I really think that's on you. I don't think it's on developers or the ecosystem or the people that made the altcoin even. It's on the investor. Let's see. He also mentioned, Roger also mentioned towards the end there that he still has about 95% of the Bitcoin Cash. So he said two different things. I don't know which one's true, but I'm going to believe this one, that he has most of the Bitcoin Cash, and even a few hundred for him if he has the amount that he was purported to have. That if he sold a few hundred, that would be consistent with what he said. He also mentioned that Blockstream doing Lightning Network, that they should have forked off on their own. That was kind of his argument. I would say that the flaw to that argument is that with Lightning Network and with Segwit, the core developers went through the consensus process, whereas the big blockers did not. And that's the big difference with what Peter Woolley did with Segwit versus what FTrader and Dedalnix did with Bitcoin ABC and a hard fork. Following the consensus process requires a lot of technical review and things like that. Like forking off the network does not, and they're very, very different things. Let's see. They talked a lot about like Lightning Network's not going to be enough that they're going to still need bigger blocks. And I don't think, frankly, that core developers disagree. If you want to scale to the size of Visa or MasterCard, that's something that you are going to have to do. It just doesn't need to be done right now. I don't think it's core developers have said we're never ever going to hard fork. It was more like, hey, I don't think it's necessary at this stage in the game. And we'll see after Lightning. I think it's entirely possible that we go to a bigger block maybe a couple years from now when Lightning is very popular and we're filling up blocks with like Segwit transactions and we have a better infrastructure and things like that. I do agree with both of them that the market should decide. Even Roger Ver said that the market should decide which one's the better coin. And right now it looks like Bitcoin is better, at least doing better than Bitcoin Cash from a price perspective. So that's all I have to say. I'll let Tone go.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make it quick. I think we're gonna end this video. Are we doing the Bitcoin group in about an hour?
Yeah, we'll be back in about an hour for the Bitcoin group, which we were supposed to be writing right now. So it'll be, as they say on Saturday Night Live, hastily assembled.
Right. So I'll make this quick then. I see both sides of, well, let the market decide, and no, don't let the market decide. Let the smart people that understand what the hell they're doing perhaps decide first. Maybe not to the degree of controlling other people, but at least from the degree of technology, because we can't prove whether one technology is a little bit more sound than the other. Now, what I didn't like about the situation is Roger Ver saying, well, Core should have forked. I think that is a ridiculous argument. And what day exactly does Roger Ver, did Roger Ver want Core to fork? Because guess what? We were forking. The user activated soft fork was going to fork, okay? And that's exactly what we kind of did, and they wanted to be on their own, fine. When exactly did he want to do it? Did he want Peter Willa to fork off the moment back in Montreal when he first introduced segregated witness? I believe it was Montreal, it might have been Hong Kong. I was at both events. I don't remember which one he introduced segregated witness. And then it was found that it's possible to do it as a soft fork, right? So what would Roger want them to do? Did he want, so this core developer, the one that people consider one of the smartest engineers in the world, found a solution to scaling. You know what? Here's a great idea. How about he start his own altcoin with that, right? And what happens if he would have, right? What if Peter Willa would have hard forked with segregated witness, and Roger would have, been left behind, and then everybody and the miners would have switched to the new fork? Okay, how does that make sense? How does that make logical sense, right? So this is ridiculous. Bitcoin Core was always a decentralized, organically generated code base, okay? And there isn't a single day you can find. It's like, well, let's find the day that caused the 2008 financial crisis, and if we can go back in time, as long as we can eliminate this one day, everything would be fixed. Like there is no smoking gun in these situations, right? Now, what the big blockers did, they picked a day and they went with it, and I think they did an absolute terrible job, because the day they should have picked should have been lined up with the New York agreement, but they didn't do that. So that's going to be a whole new can of worms that we're going to be dealing with over the next 3 months.
All right, and I think we've pretty much rounded up the debate, covered everything. We still have 1,250 live viewers. Thanks to everybody for giving us a thumbs up and a share. If it's your first time here, please subscribe down below. Maybe you have some friends. You could tell them about it. They could subscribe too. Maybe you don't have friends. That's a bigger problem. But we're going to be back in about an hour with the Bitcoin group. If you'd like to send us some donations, we've got our donation address here. It looks like we got a 0.003444765 and a nice, easy to read 0.0001 and 0.0006.
That's the other Segwit transaction, the 3AVX. That's the one from when we did the Segwit show. That's the that's the transaction I created. It finally got included like 6 blocks ago, so it took like a day.
Aha! It works.
Yeah, it works. So both of those, the top 2 are actually from Segwit donations that we got from that address during the show. So thank you to all those viewers that did that. Yeah, it was kind of fun to try it out.
Thanks to everybody for watching. We'll be back in about an hour. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.